Okay, we continue to have very generous people who recognize the cause of fighting the COVID-19 pandemic, who continue to give and to give for that good cause. I now invite Mr. Stuart Laplace, who is the director of the St. Kitts and Nevis Bureau of Standards, to address us. Mr. Laplace.
Good afternoon and greetings to all. I would first like to say thanks to the COVID-19 Task Force for inviting the Bureau to speak today. Now, my presentation would be in two parts. First, I would speak about sanitization, and then I would speak about standards. Now, sanitization. The best method to sanitize, of course, would be soap and water, simply because you increase the contact time by using soap and water compared to alcohol. However, we can't work with soap and water everywhere. So the best method to use outside in this instance would be alcohol. Now, there are some sanitizers that contain anywhere between 60 and 70% alcohol. However, because there are other additives inside, like things like scents, they would reduce the actual strength of the alcohol. So in most instances, you're not more or less cleaning your hands and sanitizing at the same time. If your hands are oily or if you have any deposits on there, you'll just be cleaning your hand, but you're not really sanitizing. You would have to use a second dose to sanitize. Now, besides alcohol, you can also use bleach, and I'm speaking specifically to in the home now. We're spending a lot of time indoors, which means we'll be doing a lot of cleaning, constantly wiping down cupboards and faucets and a lot of the handles. It can become very expensive. We're indoors now, I think, over a month. For most persons, especially the younger individuals. So that means that you'll be in the house when the cleaning is being done, so the dilution of some of those strong agents is very important. So for instance, if you are sanitizing, let's say a countertop, instead of using the bleach directly from the container, even though it comes from the factory diluted, and I'm speaking about Clorox to be specific, it's still very strong for the hands, so you can make your own household wipes, for instance. If you have a gallon bottle of water, you can use a third cup of bleach to sanitize safely, less stress on your hands. And if you're using a 5-liter bottle, then you can take it up to a half cup of Clorox, and you can use that continuously. It's very effective against the SARS-CoV-2, and it helps to eliminate the buildup. Now, if you're using Clorox in the home, you shouldn't be using alcohol at the same time, simply because there would be a buildup over time, and you could be releasing some compounds that could be detrimental to your health. For instance, when Clorox, which contains sodium hypochlorite, when that combines with alcohol, it produces chloroform, hydrochloric acid, and acetone. So which means everybody knows chloroform from the days gone where it was used as a sedative to sort of put you to sleep. And if you have that buildup in your house over time, then you could have some of those gases. Even though in small concentrations, they could build up over time. Now, another note would be something like, simply because if you combine those two again, you could have the onset of a gas called chloramine, which affects the lungs, and you could have fluid buildup, which is caused by chemical pneumonia. So you have to also be aware of that. And finally, where the sanitization is concerned, and one of my personal favorites would be hydrogen peroxide, because it's less invasive in the environment. However, you should note that for hand use or even sanitization around the house, then you should use anywhere between 1% and 3% to be safe. And if you don't want to continually spray it, you can prepare a bath beside, let's say, in the kitchen faucet or a faucet inside the bathroom, and you can just dip your hands in it for about 30 seconds to increase the contact time, and then you'll be sanitized. So that's it in terms of the cleaning agents and how you would use them around the house. Now I would preface my statements along the standards line to discuss some standards that are now available for use from the International Standards Organization, ISO, which has made 28 standards available for use for free. They're available on our website, and you can find those at www.sknbs.org. And those standards speak specifically to all of the apparatus, equipment that would be used in this COVID-19 fight. So it's very important, if anyone out there is getting into the business of importing some of these equipment, test kits, etc., it's important to look at the standard methods that were used to develop them. That way you ensure that the quality of the product in which you're using is specifically designed to fight this particular disease, which is the COVID-19. Now, in addition to that, I would also like to encourage the local manufacturers who will be making the sanitizers and who will be bottling the water and all of that, to ensure that it is important to still follow the labeling regulations of putting on when the product was made, who it was made by, etc., so we could have contact tracing in the event anything goes wrong in the manufacturing process, simply because we know everybody's under stress and you're trying to meet a great demand, and you might be falling short of supply, and you would be maybe taking a few shortcuts. So we would like to encourage you to ensure that we keep the standards in play, because I'm pretty sure that the task force is already overwhelmed with this COVID-19 pandemic, and I wouldn't like to see local epidemics spurring up from rush practices and shortcuts. So I would like to thank the COVID-19 task force for inviting us, and it's a pleasure to be here. And stay safe, and make sure you wash your hands.
Thank you, Mr. Laplace. I now invite Mr. Paul Quealy, who is the Director in the Department of Consumer Affairs, to address us. Mr. Quealy.
Good afternoon, all. I would like to disseminate some information to the general public regarding issues which have been making the rounds on social media as we implement measures to address the COVID-19 pandemic. The major of these is price gouging at supermarkets. I first must highlight what price gouging actually is. Price gouging refers to when a seller increases the prices of goods or services to a level much higher than would be normally considered to be fair or reasonable. For example, if the price of an item is increased from $7 per se to $25. From our initial investigations of these claims of price gouging, we have seen that many of these complaints are in connection to price increases of $1 or $1 and a few cents. Although we do recognize that this is a difficult period for many individuals and every penny counts, it must be highlighted that food prices will fluctuate periodically due to economical forces and supermarkets trying to remain competitive with each other. I would encourage persons, however, who do think that they have come across instances of price gouging and excessive pricing of commodities to bring this to the attention of the Consumer Affairs Department at 465-1550 by email at consumeraffairs.skn@gmail.com or on our Facebook page, Consumer Affairs SKN. It will also be beneficial that once you're filing a complaint, you have the receipt for the items purchased. Secondly, although the Consumer Affairs cannot determine the selling prices of food items throughout the Federation, we closely monitor the prices of the government's price control items, which comprise the food basket, in addition to items which fall outside of this category, to get a holistic picture of food price fluctuations on a quarterly basis. The price control food basket items is comprised of 23 categories, and these are as follows: chicken, frozen; meats, frozen; fish, frozen; meat, salted and in brine; fish, salted and in brine; Vienna sausages; cornmeal; dried peas; cereal; butter; margarine; pasta products; cheese, cheddar cheese, which is the cheese that is in the tin, which is sliced at shops; sardines; tuna and fish; fresh fruit and vegetables; toothpaste; lard and cooking substitutes; cooking oil; rice, toilet paper; soap, medicated soap only; powdered detergent; and disposable diapers for adults and children. In relation to these items, wholesalers are only allowed a 20% markup on the landed cost. Retailers within the Bastia area and rural areas are allowed a 25% markup on frozen items such as chicken, meats, and fish, while other items listed are allowed a 20% markup. These percentage markups are the maximum percentage allowed under SRNO 41 of 2007. However, it has been observed that some retailers do not apply the maximum markup percentages allowed, hereby resulting in price differences between retailers. All other items outside of this list carry no restrictions, and companies are allowed to use markup percentages which are not determined by the government, but they should not be geared at taking advantage of consumers. Finally, based on a USDA food report dated April 16, 2020, the outlook for domestic food production of agricultural commodities, including cereals, meats, and dairy, is very good. It was further highlighted that the supplies are not only sufficient to quantities to feed the U.S. As you know, the U.S. is one of our main hubs for importation of food. It is not only, supplies are not only enough to feed the U.S., but also maintain robust export levels in the face of COVID-19. In light of this, consumers should shop wisely and not practice panic buying. I would like to ensure the public that as a member of the COVID-19 Compliance Task Force, the Consumer Affairs Department will be continuing its regular field visits to various establishments to ensure that the law in regard to consumer protection is followed, and lobbying for amendments to existing legislation where necessary for the benefit of the public. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Quealy. I now invite Superintendent Cromwell Henry Divisional Commander for District A, to give us his report.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. Pleasant good afternoon to all listening to this broadcast. I will start as usual with an update on security forces activity in terms of arrests. For the last 24 hours, there was one arrest of a person who breached the curfew last night. This brings the total to 80, total to date, 70 on St. Kitts and 10 on Nevis. One person is in custody, assisting the police with the investigation into a fatal shooting incident that occurred sometime after 9 p.m. in Parsons Village on April 22nd. Preliminary inquiry so far have revealed that a 22-year-old Clement Mills, who reside at Parsons Village, was at home at the time of the incident. The assailant went to his house and started firing gunshots and then fled the scene. Mills was transported by ambulance to the JNF hospital, where he succumbed to his injuries. The police are making an appeal to anyone who may have any information in relation to this incident to call the Violent Crimes Unit at 467-1887 or 662-3468 or the nearest police station. Persons can also share information using the crime hotline 707. Investigations into the matter are ongoing. Day 3 of limited operation days was less hectic than the previous days. We continue to see persons making reasonable attempts to comply with the physical distancing requirements, particularly at business places. The traffic department, however, is reporting that they are not as pleased with the behavior of some bus drivers. They are not complying with the conditions that were laid down that permit them to carry more than 4 passengers, as was the previous requirement. And some are carrying more than 9 passengers, and they are not strictly enforcing the provisions for their passengers to wear masks. We want to remind you that these conditions are not just recommendations by the police, they are mandated by law, and the police will enforce the law if persons continue to flout these regulations. When you do so, you are putting not only your own health at risk, but that of the other passengers who may be trying to comply with all the regulations and stipulations. So we again make an appeal to bus drivers to ensure that you sanitize your bus regularly, at least at the end of each trip. Ensure that persons entering the bus, their hands are sanitized. Ensure that not more than 2 persons are seated per row of seating in the bus. And ensure that all passengers wear masks while traveling on the bus. Additionally, your windows should be open. I know the sun can be hot, but you are required to drive with your windows open, unless of course it is raining. And we ask that you keep these regulations in mind and comply. Thank you.
Thank you, Superintendent Henry. I now invite Dr. Marissa Carty, who is a PRO for the Health Emergency Operations Center, to give us the COVID-19 situation report.
Thank you, Mr. Williams, and pleasant good evening to all. As of Thursday, 23rd April, 3 p.m., the World Health Organization reports 2,549,632 confirmed cases of COVID-19, with 175,825 deaths. In the Federation, 260 persons have been sampled and tested, with 15 confirmed positive, 233 confirmed negative, and 12 results pending. 2 confirmed cases have recovered, with 0 deaths to date. There is currently 1 person quarantined in a government facility, while 106 persons are quarantined at home. 13 persons remain in isolation, while 633 persons have been released from quarantine. This outbreak of COVID-19 may be stressful for many persons, especially those persons in isolation, quarantine, and even the general public during the 24-hour lockdown days. Fear and anxiety about the disease can be overwhelming and cause strong emotions to both adults and children. Stress during an infectious disease outbreak can include anxiety about your own health and the health of your loved ones, changes in sleep and eating patterns, difficulty sleeping and concentrating, worsening chronic and mental health conditions, and increased use of alcohol, tobacco, and other drugs. How you respond to the outbreak can depend on your background, the things that make you different from other people, and the community you live in. Taking care of yourself, your family, and your friends can help you cope with the stress that may arise in isolation, and helping others cope with their stress can also make your community stronger. Some ways to cope with this stress: take time to grow spiritually. Even while you are isolated, you can find happiness in being aware of your spiritual need and filling it with Bible study and prayer. Take breaks from watching, reading, or listening to news stories, including social media. Hearing about the pandemic repeatedly can be upsetting for some. Take care of your body. Take deep breaths, stretch or meditate, eat healthily and well-balanced meals, exercise regularly and get plenty sleep, and avoid alcohol and drugs. Take time to unwind. Try to do some other activities you enjoy, like reading, or even engaging in DIY or do-it-yourself projects. Connect with others. Talk with people you trust about your concerns and how you are feeling. This can be done via the various social media platforms available. Being able to cope with stress during isolation, quarantine, or lockdown will make you, the people you care about, and your community stronger. Let us all work together to take care of our emotional and mental health. For more COVID-19 related information and updates on our national statistics, continue to visit our official website, www.covid19.gov.kn, our Health Promotion Facebook page, and our Health Promotion YouTube channel. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Carty. I now invite Mr. Abdia Samuel, Chair of the COVID-19 National Task Force, to address us.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. Good afternoon, all. Those tuning in via internet, radio, and those who are watching on television, good afternoon to you, and thank you again for joining us at another NEOC Daily Situation Report. 311 would have processed for the past 24 hours a total of 23 calls, 20 on St. Kitts, 3 on Nevis. 911, 64 calls. St. Kitts, NEOC, 1 call, and that was for assistance. EOC on Nevis, 4 calls. Today, I would have convened several meetings, and one of the successful meetings I had today, which I was joined by Dr. Hazel Laws, our CMO, was meeting with the Latino community or the Spanish-speaking community on St. Kitts and Nevis. This meeting was very fruitful as we were able to engage them on topics such as enforcing hygiene protocol, and also ensuring that they understand the social and physical distancing protocols that are within the regulations. We also encourage them to look out for signs and symptoms of persons who may show anything regarding the COVID-19 virus. And they were very happy to be engaged. They have been receiving the videos that are translated into Spanish from our daily briefing. For that, they were very grateful. The targeted audience that we met with was mainly those who have businesses such as barber shops, salons, and we also ensure that those who have bars understand that the liquor licenses are suspended and they should not be operating. They welcome it. They agree that they need to play their part as well in the community, not to be a contributor to the spread of the COVID-19 virus. For us, that was very pleasing, and I want to thank Dr. Laws for also engaging, and they were very happy to receive and be recognized by Dr. Laws and the National Task Force. Today, the COVID Compliance Task Force visited a total of 96 businesses. And I want to commend the hard work that their leadership, in that of Chief Immigration Officer, Ms. Muslin Hughes, and Sergeant Sophia Henry, are carrying out with this energetic group of servicemen and women. They would have visited barbershops, hair salons, supermarkets, pharmacies, laundromats, photo studios, restaurants, and bars. In general, the task force noted that the main issues is the lack of markings, of 6 feet markings to ensure physical distancing. So at this time, I want to make an appeal to the business communities, as I said to you before, and I'm going to say to you again. This week, we are using it to educate you. The second week, which begins next week, Monday, again, we are going to evaluate you. Following that is going to be enforcement. As I continue, most persons were, one of the positive things as I continue was that they reported was that most persons were wearing masks and they observed proper hand sanitization or hand hygiene that was being practiced by most of our citizens and residents. However, again, one of the things that they observed was the retail shops who are still continuing to sell alcoholic beverages. I wish to remind all businesses that the liquor licenses have been suspended temporarily during the state of emergency. Again, liquor licenses have been suspended. Please, I will ask you to cease and desist from carrying out such exercises of selling alcoholic beverages. Retail. Again, retail. We appeal to the businesses to ensure compliance with the hygiene protocols, social and physical distancing protocols in adhering to the regulations. Again, please adhere to the social and physical distancing protocols in adherence to the regulations. You will have absolutely no excuse for when the enforcement begins. Persons who are in quarantine or isolation, again, I want to remind you, you are to remain in quarantine or in isolation until the authorities release you back into society. Again, please remain in quarantine and isolation until your time has passed. I want to take this opportunity to acknowledge a number of wonderful, high-spirited, patriotic citizens who every day rise to the challenge of supporting the national response efforts. Today, we were graced by a beautiful cake that motivated and moved all of us. And as Dr. Wilkinson shared a light moment with Lesroy, said that his portion was bigger than Lesroy's own. This cake was done by Jamie's Creation. So Jamie's Creation, thank you for donating that wonderful cake. And if you look on the screen, look at that beautiful cake. However, it's been actually dominated by Dr. Wilkinson and of course Dr. Laws. But we will share it equally, no matter what. I also want to acknowledge Vision and Voices of Wesley Methodist Church for their donation of assorted bread. And they are delicious. As the deliverer said to us, it's for tea time. So thank you so much for that. And Mr. Ivor Blake and family for donating a cake to the NEOC. Dr. Laws and Dr. Wilkinson, yeah, as you may see, we're going to have to do a lot of exercise after we finish with all these cakes. I want to thank Damian Hobson for providing snacks for the NEOC. And I also want to acknowledge the community police team, and we saw them in action today. They were in the communities of McKnight and Newtown, working hard, engaging the people. In particular, they engaged the vulnerable groups or the minority groups, non-nationals, and from the feedback I am receiving from the community, they actually appreciated and had a good time with the police. Police are human beings, as I keep saying to you all the time. Some of you have queried that you would like to have your questions heard or mentioned or broadcast by Mr. Lesroy Williams. If you wish to do so, I wish to share with you a number via WhatsApp where you can share your questions. However, I just want to caution you that NEMO and the NEOC, National Working Group, and everyone here enjoys a wonderful relationship with the media. The media, I consider them to be one of my criticals. Well, let me retract that. We consider the media one of our critical partners in this fight against COVID-19. They are very important, as they are the voice of the people at times. And we give priority to the media for their questions first. However, I want you to use this number, 762-4888. Again, 762-4888 for you to send your questions via WhatsApp. Again, 762-4888. So you send your questions via WhatsApp for this daily briefing. I also want to commend highly, I want to thank him for reaching out to us. That's Mr. Charles Wilkin QC, for taking your time, sir, to send in some words of encouragement and motivation to the task force and myself and others. The gesture is well accepted and welcome, and these are the simple and little things that motivate us and fuel us to continue going on a daily basis. Again, as I conclude, I want to encourage that we engage in some wonderful discussions today, that you have some great questions to motivate us here today and bring some information and highlight any doubts that you may have as it regards any information that is shared. So thank you, and I look forward to engaging you with the question and answer period. Mr. Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Samuel, and we would move right into the questions. Of course, we always look forward to your questions. That is a part of this briefing that is interactive and where you can share your concerns and get your questions answered. I am an emergency medical technician. And yes, we all have concerns about how we have been recognized during this crisis that is going on in our federation. To date, during the daily briefings, we are not recognized for our work during all of this. Truth be told, we are the ones who are on the front because it is us who have the first point of contact. But we only hear of the doctors and the nurses, the police, the St. Kitts and Nevis Defense Force. So we are looking and listening for any clarification as to why this has not been done. We will continue to listen daily. Could someone please address this? Dr. Wilkinson.
Well, first of all, let me apologize to the EMTs if they did not hear us recognize them before. But one of the things that we say all the time is that we recognize our frontline workers. But to be specific, I want to say what a great job our EMTs have been doing over the years, and specifically in this crisis, because when it was first announced that it reached our shores, these were the persons who were going to be first online contacting any potential persons. And even when they go out every single day, somebody might call and say they have a headache, but they may not mention that they have a cough or a flu-like illness. And so they are the ones who are risking their lives. And so I want to recognize them specifically at this point for all the work that they have been doing. And I just want to continue to say that I recognize every single person who's working in the hospital, because every single person there, the doctors, the nurses, the EMTs, the X-ray technicians, the maids, the cooks, the persons who are working in the garden to keep the place clean, every single worker. So if I missed anyone, I apologize, but we are all part of the health team. And when I speak about the health workers and the health team, we're not just speaking about doctors and nurses, but we're speaking about every single individual, because every nut and bolt at that institution is important to keep it together. I thank you.
Everyone is important in the fight. This is first a commendation and then a question. I just want to congratulate the team on what it's doing, especially the CMO and her staff, in keeping the country updated on the COVID-19. Question: in relation to the ignorance of stigmatizing COVID-19 persons, is it true that persons who recover from COVID-19 may have helpful antibodies that may prevent them from getting the virus again, as well as contributing to developing a cure for this virus? And the second question, I read something on Facebook this morning about the St. Kitts and Nevis Biomedical Center donating antibody test kits. Are these test kits the same test kits that Dr. Drew donated a few weeks ago? And if so, why are those test kits accepted a few weeks later if someone else donated a similar test kit and was genuinely accepted? CMO.
All right, so good afternoon again. We thank you for your 2 questions. And yes, if you have been diagnosed with COVID-19 and have recovered, you would automatically have developed antibodies to this new coronavirus. Now, as we've said before, this is a new virus and we are still learning. There's a lot about this virus that is still unknown, and we are uncertain about a number of things. And to date, we do not know how long, when you would have developed these antibodies, we do not know for how long this level of immunity would last. Would it last a few months or a few years or even a lifetime? All right, and so yes, once you would have been diagnosed with COVID-19, once you would have recovered, you would have developed antibodies against this virus. You would have developed immunity, and that's important and that's good, and it would help us as a federation to develop herd immunity. Now, your second question speaks to the donation of COVID-19 antibody test kits, and Minister Wendy Phipps would have acknowledged receipt of 2 donations, one of 250 test kits from Dr. Andy Redmond and Mr. Alexis Nisbet, and a second donation from Dr. Drew of 19 COVID-19 test kits. Both donations were genuinely accepted. However, on Sunday, April 19th, we would have highlighted that the World Health Organization made a significant recommendation to the world, and that is we should be wary of using the COVID-19 antibody test kits for the diagnosis of this new coronavirus. And because of that, the Ministry of Health is now just utilizing the RT-PCR, or the molecular test, which is the gold standard for the diagnosis of COVID-19 in the Federation at present. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Laws. Now, there is a slew of questions that people are asking, but they're putting them more in statements. They're not really. They're observing what is happening. There are people who are out there in the society observing what is happening, realizing that people are not complying with the regulations and so on, and they are sending their concerns and their complaints and so on. These are very conscientious citizens, and I would read some of them. Good afternoon, Mr. Abdius Samuel. Please add some clarity on the liquor license temporary suspension. Some retail shops and mini-marts still have liquors on their shelves. Is this a breach of the temporary liquor suspension, or is it okay for them to do so?
If you have the liquor on your shelves and they're just there on your shelves and you're selling other goods and not selling liquor, that is okay. But if you are selling liquor, that would be a breach of the regulation.
I am a resident of St. Peter's, and I use the buses daily. I have observed that only a few of the bus drivers are adhering to the rules that were stipulated. Can someone address this matter urgently? This is just an observation. I passed today again by a bar and saw many persons congregated there. No mask. Their mask around their necks, beers in hand, and everyone right on each other, both male and female. I find a lot of persons still don't understand the serious situation we're in. Persons are still living carefree with no regard. It's so sad that careless persons might put our little country in a very dreadful situation. The police can't be everywhere. So sad. Why are the Spanish bars at Baker's Corner and Newtown still having their club gatherings at nights? And they were told to implement social distancing. The security officers need to investigate what is going on behind those closed doors at nights. St. Kitts and Nevis is a small society. We need our people to live longer and to continue to be safe. Superintendent, could you address those?
I hope that person is not one of the patrons of the bar. With respect to the buses, I did mention the buses, our observation in terms of the buses not totally complying with the regulations, and we are addressing that. The bars, we speak about that day after day. I mentioned in one of my presentations that we would eventually make a decision to take it to the next level and begin to arrest. We have been educating, we have been making appeals, we have been asking persons to comply. There's going to come a time when we're going to stop and we're going to start to enforce the law, and our arrest numbers would start to climb again. So we're just giving warnings for now. We are making appeals. We're giving people a reasonable opportunity to amend their ways and comply with the regulations. Once we start to enforce and we start making arrests, we cannot be accused of acting heavy-handedly, because we would have given persons sufficient time to correct their errors.
Okay. With reference to the Spanish bars being open at night, I wouldn't know, because once 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock hit, I try my best to be at home because I don't want the police to arrest me. However, again, let me say, we reach out to the Spanish community. I have reached out myself to a number of the leaders in the community, because I have heard the same rumors as, the concern that was shared just now. And we are going to enhance the awareness campaign with them, and that is why I asked the community policing team to go into those areas today and speak and engage with a number of them. I have also engaged a number of the business owners who have denied some of it. Others do claim that it is happening, and we are hopeful that as of today, with immediate effect, that is going to end, and the police also have been charged to engage them in a positive way, to educate them, and then, if necessary, enforce the law. Thank you.
Okay, this question, Mr. Samuel said in his report that the sale of alcoholic beverages is illegal during the state of emergency. I think it would be more accurate to say that it is only if the regulations state that that is the case, then it is so. In other words, it is the regulations in existence at the time which sets out the specific restrictions, curfew times, etc. Could Mr. Samuel or Superintendent Henry please clarify?
The sale of alcohol is not a blanket prohibition on the sale of alcohol generally. It is just the retail liquor licenses are the ones that are affected. Wholesale businesses, they can continue to operate and sell wholesale liquor. Let me read section regulation 14. It says, notwithstanding the provisions of the Liquor Licenses Act, chapter 18.21, all retail liquor licenses are suspended once a period of emergency is declared in relation to COVID-19. So we are in the period of emergency still, and so all retail liquor licenses are suspended. Wholesale licenses and other licenses continue to exist.
This one is from SKN Newsline for Dr. Wilkinson. We know of the extra danger for persons with underlying illnesses contracting COVID-19. In more recent times, it is emerging that substantial numbers of normal healthy persons, China and the USA, who contracted the virus seem to have suffered from strokes. Can you add your perspective on this, Dr. Wilkinson?
Just before I answer your question, while I was sitting there, I got a WhatsApp indicating that I had forgotten the persons who work in the lab, the technologists, and so I want to recognize them also. And any other person who I've forgotten, I recognize you. As it relates to the strokes, a lot of the clinical information coming out of some of the countries that have suffered the most from this virus found that there is a high incidence of clots, and so persons have been having a lot of embolic phenomena, whether it's clot related to loss of limbs, clots in the lungs, and also in the brain that can give a stroke. And as I say, it's a new disease. We are still learning, but again, there is a high incidence of clotting related to advanced disease with COVID-19.
Okay, good day. I am a concerned national with the following commendation and questions for customer pricing. I highly commend all involved in keeping us updated and safe for the last few weeks. The team unity government must be singled out for ensuring the systems in place so very early, which resulted in us, 1, getting our first case so late in the game, 2, having so few cases to date, basically, 3, preventing any positive case from going on to be very serious, 4, not having a spike in infections. Questions. 1. Is it legal for supermarkets not to have their products priced, either individually or otherwise? 2. How legal, if at all, is it for supermarkets to have products on the shelves for one price, but when they are sold cold, they are sold at a higher price? 3. You look at the product on the shelf in a supermarket and see some of them at one price and others at a different price. Which price should you pay for the product? The higher price or the lower one, and why? Mr. Quealy.
Good afternoon again. Supermarkets may charge a higher price for cold beverages because they want to recuperate what they're spending, for making a beverage cold, electricity prices. Basically, in our Consumer Protection Act, we do not have any legislation to regulate that. So they're basically free to do that. In respect to prices on the shelves, in our act for sure, the Consumer Protection Act, if you notice that there are 2 prices on an item, you're supposed to pay the lesser of these 2 prices. If you get to the cash register and they're telling you there's a different price in the system as to what is on the shelf, that is not the fault of the consumer, that is the fault of the store itself. So they cannot force the consumer to pay a higher price at the cash register. And the third question was?
The products that are not priced. They have products on the shelf that are not priced.
That is a tough one as well, because the legislation right now, it does not have any stipulation stating that the prices must be on the items or on the shelf. However, we have legislation in the works that is going to cover that. Hopefully, it will be coming in place very shortly.
Okay. This is just for Dr. Laws, for Dr. Carty. In speaking of spiritual growth, Dr. Carty referred specifically to reading the Bible. I would like to point out that we also have persons in our community who are of other religious faiths, beliefs. So reference to spirituality should recognize the diversity of religious beliefs and avoid highlighting any one faith so that all feel recognized and respected. I think Dr. Carty will concur with that and agree with that. Right. Dr. Laws? Okay. This question has to do with the partial curfew and when an announcement will be made after the partial curfew comes to an end. Persons may need to make plans for shopping, etc. Do we have any? Minister Phipps?
Good afternoon. Unfortunately, the Attorney General is not with us as yet, or at least not in the building because he may be on the premises. But the short answer to the question is that information with regards to what happens after the present set of regulations end as it relates to partial or full lockdown would be made public by tomorrow. We do recognize that based on the existing set of regulations that we have, we would have only had instructions taking us down to 6 a.m. on Saturday morning. So we do promise you that before that time happens, sometime during the course of tomorrow, the announcement may be made relative to what would be the conditions of partial or full lockdown for the next 7-day period thereafter. With your leave, Mr. Williams, while I am here at the podium, I would like to use this opportunity, since I was a bit late getting here, to join with Dr. Wilkinson and the Chief Medical officer in saying a very sincere thank you to First Caribbean International Bank for their contribution this afternoon of some $27,000 towards the COVID-19 financing. I would also like the opportunity to indicate that demonstrations of this sort coming from First Caribbean is not unusual nor abnormal. First Caribbean is one of those entities, financial houses, which prides itself on being a good corporate citizen and having a good corporate social responsibility track record. In the past, and they're still doing it, First Caribbean International Bank would have partnered with the Ministry of Health and Social Services, etc., in terms of co-sponsorship of our Teen Mothers Program, Project Viola, and every year they also contribute, especially in the month of October, which is Breast Cancer Awareness Month. So we do congratulate them and we thank them sincerely for their continued support to the St. Kitts and Nevis community.
Thank you, Minister Phipps. This one is for Dr. Laws. Can you confirm the timeline for the next test results? There are persons who are still waiting on their results for more than 14 days.
Thank you, Mr. Williams, for your question. We continue to be one of the CARICOM member states with the highest per capita for testing, or the highest testing rate per capita. Now, to date, we only have 12 results pending. The results will soon be delivered, as I am sure. More importantly, the persons who are needed, who are to be isolated and quarantined, they are in isolation and quarantine. All right, and as soon as test results become available, we update our situation report to reflect same. Thank you.
Okay, these are our last two questions for today. I am a professional cosmetologist. How are you going to deal with persons who are braiding hair on their verandas with no form of protection? I am very much concerned about this because of what I have seen. So I suppose people might be taking people into their homes to do the hair business and so on. Dr. Laws.
And so we want to thank you for bringing that observation to the fore. So you are saying that there are individuals who may be braiding their neighbors here on their veranda or their porch. And so we want to utilize this forum to reach out to those individuals. And we are saying that you need to protect yourselves and protect the individual who's here you are braiding. And so in terms of what do we recommend? Well, the person who is braiding the hair, that individual should of course be wearing a face mask, and that individual, I recommend, should be wearing a pair of disposable gloves. And then the individual whose hair is braided, that individual should also be wearing a face mask and should have had their hands sanitized because both individuals will be in close contact with each other. So that's the recommendation that I would make. And then I'll go a step further. Now, if as you observe such, I think you have a responsibility to speak to both individuals and share with them the information that you have heard from this forum. Thank you.
Okay, this is the last question for today. I would like to know if the government is doing anything to assist our nationals who are stuck on cruise ships on sea. I know of two persons who are on a ship, and a man just died of COVID-19 a couple days ago on that very same cruise ship. Who would like to take that? Ms. Hughes? Minister Phipps will take. I would like to know if our government is doing anything to assist our nationals who are stuck on cruise ships at sea. I know of 2 persons who are on a cruise ship, and the man just died of COVID-19 a couple days ago on that very same cruise ship. What can be done to assist them to get home?
Mr. Williams, that is a very tricky question, because whoever is taking a cruise at this time is doing it at great risk to his or her health, considering that there is a lockdown insofar as the Florida Caribbean Cruise Association is concerned, and that cruise line, that cruise association represents several member lines, including but not limited to Royal Caribbean, Cunard, Norwegian, MCS Cruises, as well as the Bremer Group out of the EU. So I would shudder to think that in this kind of environment, we would have citizens who are that oblivious to what is going on when it comes to cruise travel. And of course, none of what would have happened in terms of the Diamond Princess and other cruise lines that would have dominated the news over the last 8 to 9 weeks should have escaped anyone who is paying attention. However, when it comes to our citizens who may be on board a cruise ship of that nature, it begs the question, what would be the best approach to dealing with that individual? Because while as a citizen it is your constitutional right to return to the Federation if you are out of the Federation, at the same time the government, with all of the best intentions, cannot endanger the lives of emergency workers and other persons in this type of environment to physically extract somebody off of a cruise ship where there is an outbreak of COVID-19. And even if such an individual managed to get to St. Kitts and Nevis, we also have to put the regular WHO recommended regulations in place in terms of quarantine, isolation, and testing at the same time. Or the person is working on the ship? Oh, I see. Well, that the argument still holds, because if the FCCA has shut down cruising and the US government put the full stop behind that several weeks later, whether you're going as a passenger or a member of crew, you should not be anywhere on the high seas now at this point. But my answer still holds, regardless of whether the person is working as a crew member or somebody who has decided to take a cruise at this time, which will be fraught with difficulty.
Thank you very much, Minister. Of course, everybody wants to get home. And sometimes getting home at this point in time is not very easy. It's very challenging. Borders are closed. People have to remain where they are, and to put into practice everything that we have been speaking about, the social distancing, the wearing of the mask, and the staying at home, and all of that, and maintaining themselves safe. It is very risky at this time to travel. Thanks to all for their questions. I have an announcement that I want to make from the Supervisor of Elections for the Electoral Commission. The Electoral Commission wishes to announce that the electoral offices are open for registration of voters and for all other activities. The opening hours are 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. daily, except for days when there is a 24-hour curfew. The general public is advised that the offices will continue to observe the precautions established by law and promoted by the NEOC. That is, no more than 3 persons will be allowed in the office at any one time. Persons will be required to stand 6 feet apart, and persons are encouraged to wear face masks, but will be required to remove them for identification purposes and for photographs. Further, please take note that hearings of objections to registration will resume shortly. Persons affected by these objections and ensuing hearings will be notified of the revised schedules. Now, that is from the Supervisor of Elections for the Electoral Commission. I want to thank all who participated today in our daily briefing. We say a hearty thank you to First Caribbean International Bank Limited for their generous donation of $27,000, accepted by our Chief Medical Officer, Dr. Hazel Laws, and handed over by our Medical Chief of Staff, Dr. Wilkinson. We also thank Mr. Stuart Laplace, who is the director of the St. Kitts and Nevis Bureau of Standards, to sharing with us sanitizing tips and so on. Somebody told me that the hand sanitizers, because of the alcohol content in them, they are flammable. So people must be careful, because you don't want your hand to be, you don't want to use it and then you go scratch a match and then your hand, you know, gets lit. We want to thank Mr. Paul Quealy, Director of the Department of Consumer Affairs, for coming to address certain matters with respect to consumers and issues that they are having. Superintendent Cromwell Henry, Divisional Commander for District A, for sharing with us. And it is very sad that, you know, even during time of curfew, that people still choose to get involved in this type of antisocial behavior. Dr. Marissa Carty, PRO of the Health Emergency Operations Center, for sharing with us the situation report, COVID-19 situation report. And we know we had a lot of people asking about recoveries, but now we are starting to see the recoveries. Now, it was one before, and now there's two. And then Mr. Abdias Samuel, Chair of the COVID-19 National Task Force, thanks to all of you. Thanks to Minister Phipps, Minister of State with responsibility for health. Thanks to Dr. Wilkinson, our CMO, our Chief Immigration Officer, who always comes to show her support. We thank the media, we thank ZIZ, we thank everybody who's operating these social media sites and so on, getting our work out and so on, and all of you who every day religiously tune in to listen to these briefings, to be updated in terms of what is happening in St. Kitts and Nevis with respect to the management of the COVID-19 pandemic. Thank you very much, and tomorrow we'll be back at 5 p.m. Until then, take care, be safe, wash your hands, practice the social distancing, don't be gathering at the bars, and so on.
You're on tune to 1FM 98.9. We just had the conclusion of today's daily COVID update. Stand by for the WinFM news and sports.
You found the sound. 98.9. Win FM.
We now bring you the WinFM News. The WinFM News is brought to you by Flow, The Cable, Rams, and SL Hospitals and Company Limited.
Maybe it's the way the brilliant gold liquid reflects our sunshine, or how the bright blue of its label mirrors the clear Caribbean skies overhead. Maybe it's the fresh, crisp taste of this beastly cold beer on a scorching hot day. Maybe it's even the way it brings us all together. But one thing is for sure.
My Straight Dog family, in the event you've heard that theme song, you know it's time for another edition of Straight Talk. And time to bid you a very pleasant night to those of you in St. Kitts and Nevis and to all of you throughout the entire Caribbean region. To my Straight Talk family in the Kittitian and Division diaspora, I say greetings to all who are logged on to zizonline.com. We also simultaneously broadcasting via Sugar City FM, or Sugar City St. Kitts FM, and Win FM as well. We do carry this broadcast simultaneously. And I know that those of you on the World Wide Web, there are some of you in Asia, there are some of you in Africa, there are many of you in Europe, and there are a whole lot of you all over North America. So I'm at liberty to say good night. I can say good morning, and certainly in some cases I can say good afternoon, because one of such greetings is applicable to the region in which you now find yourselves. Perhaps, just perhaps, on a short vacation. Is vacation going on now? Or you're probably stuck. Or maybe you are on a business trip and you're stuck because all the borders are closed. Or perhaps, I'm certain about this one, that many of you have considered the region in which you now find yourselves as your place of abode. Straight Talk is a public service program that facilitates and promotes free expression on all issues of national interest, be they legal, be they environmental, be they technological, social, economic, and or political issues. On Straight Talk, you do have a forum to express yourselves freely let's in the process continue to keep St. Kitts and Nevis as one of the freest countries in the entire world. On this program, we try to raise the level of national consciousness. We try to raise the level of national discourse by alerting our people to their rights, to their responsibilities, and certainly to their obligations. My name is Ian Patches Liburd, and I give Almighty God thanks for blessing me with yet another opportunity to join you in conversation on yet another occasion, my Straight Dog family. And believe it or not, I'm humbled each time that we can meet and have a conversation. For those of you who are joining me for the first time, we trust and hope it's not your last time, but just to inform you that Straight Talk is a participative program, and by that I mean we do include your calls, we do include your emails, and in the event you want to do either, you can call us via 465-2555 and or 718-577-2916. There are many who try that 465-255 number, and they're not patient, so many times you just don't get in, and I do apologize for that. But it's one number with 3 lines, and so I implore you to just wait, and you'll get in, I'm sure. Some people get in 3 and 4 times. How on earth they get that done, I don't know as well. But my Straight Dog family, if you're joining me for the first time, you can participate in the program by calling. Or there are many who are with us for a long time who just like what I call the cloak of anonymity. By that I mean they don't want to be heard on radio. They don't want to be heard, period. So they want to hide behind the cloak of anonymity. That's what I call it. So I provide that access via our email platform. That's ZIZ Straight Talk. For many of you who are trying to get that number, it's not just Straight Talk. It's ZIZ Straight Talk. That's one word. ZIZ STRAIGHTTALK@gmail.com. So if you want to hide behind your keyboard, you just access that email address. And my Straight Dog family, there are those of you who just listen, all of you, whether on whichever media, social media, Facebook, YouTube, whichever media, radio in particular, welcome to another edition of Straight Talk. And the last time we were here, we actually discussed the elections. And so those of you who are getting ulcers, there's some people seem to be getting ulcers about elections. I can assure you that elections must be called, and elections will be called. But the only one that can advise His Excellency the Governor General, as per the Constitution, when the House will be dissolved and when he shall declare the nomination date and as well an election date. But as important as elections is as well our economy. And tonight we have in studio with me, he's no stranger to Straight Talk. He's been here before and he's been back again because the economy is extremely important to all of us, my Straight Talk family, because the economy, especially the grassroots economy, speaks to the jobs, the taxi drivers, the hotel workers, the restaurant workers, those who do landscaping, all these people that I refer to as the grassroots economy. And they're important. Many people are temporarily out of a job because the hotels are closed, and even on a temporal basis as well. So to get our minds into perspective and to give us some hope, tonight I have invited and have with me in studio two special advisor in the Ministry of Finance and economist exemplary, Mr. Howie Richardson. Howie, I want to bid you good night.
Yes, good night, Patches. And I appreciate being here. I know the times are trying, but when the going gets tough, what's the adage? The tough get going. So I'm glad to be here once again. I would like to thank you for the invitation, and I wish to say good night to anybody listening to us at the moment, both local and foreign. So thank you, Patches.
Always my pleasure. Always my pleasure, Howie, and always good to have you here. Like you said, when the going gets tough, the tough gets going, and it's tough times now. It is difficult, I believe, as well, for any economist, and it may take some time. It may take most likely several years before the extent of the economic blow from COVID-19 and the global economy, and it can be estimated with some level of confidence. Matter of fact, the global economy is moving into a prolonged shutdown as we speak, and it's becoming increasingly clearer that the world is facing a drop in output, unprecedented in its breadth and its intensity. Now, recently I read an article in The Economist which suggested that some analysts predict that the growing economic disruptions and market panic are initial signs, are the first signs of an economic collapse that can be more serious than the global financial crisis in 2007, or between 2007 and 2009. Now, do you concur, Kawhi?
This pandemic, the world has not seen such a large-scale pandemic like this, I think, from the 1990s, when they had the flu. What's the name of that flu? I can't remember the name exactly, but in 1919 they had a pandemic. But this one is the mother of all pandemics. So anything that that falls out from this pandemic is not going to tell a sad story. And in fact, the world economy, it just can't get moving. I mean, this is like stuck in a big pothole, and you can't get out of it. You look left, you look right, the hole just gets wider. So the economy of St. Kitts and Nevis is intertwined in the global economy very much. In fact, the tourism sector, as you would recognize, is very much related to what happens outside in terms of our major trading partners and where our visitors come from. So we are going to really get some serious, in the local parlance, thumps. We're going to get some ponging. However, we are in a very good stead. I mean, just prior to the COVID reaching to these heights, St. Kitts was on a very good track. Remember the last time I was here, Patches, all the indicators were showing very robust increases. The tourism sector this year was supposed to be a bumper for the tourism sector. The Park Hyatt, for example, was expecting their biggest occupancy rates since their opening, and all other hotels similarly were packed with bookings. And all that to say that we were in a good stead. The fiscal accounts were very strong. Surplus after surplus cannot be said more. I mean, we saw surpluses ever since the team unity government came into power. And these surpluses have been steady and strong. And the growth has also been matching the fiscal performance of the economy. So, Patches, I'm sad to be here. I'm happy in the sense that I can shed some light on the situation. But it's a real trying time for everyone. Anyone who derives an income directly or indirectly are being affected. But good news is that we have a Prime Minister and a Minister of Finance who has shown his mettle. And you can see the decisions which are coming through have been very helpful to all those persons, whether in the tourism industry or the ancillary services, and those people who are in the private sector, big and small. So it's good news in that light. And so bad news and good news mixed together, I hope it evens out.
Y'all would want to keep hope alive, and you referred to, I think, the 1989 flu, 1918 flu. That's the Spanish flu. My memory serves me well, right?
Yes.
But this, we haven't seen nothing like this in over a century, as you just said.
Yes.
But this health crisis, Howie, has the potential to endanger economic and political stability throughout the global economy. And a matter of fact, we are part of the global economy, and even throughout the Caribbean region. And you mentioned the surpluses and the leadership that obtains here now, or exists, in St. Kitts in terms of the fiscal management within the economy. But surely this is not the first time, as you just intimated, that the world has experienced an economic shock.
Yes.
And in the Caribbean and further afield, it is already being felt. As a matter of fact, Prime Minister Gaston Brown of Antigua and Barbuda, our neighbors, was quite upfront with the situation in his country when he actually said this.
When we left office back in,
Yes, I've had that all mixed up. But Prime Minister Gaston Brown, in fact, said they have to borrow to pay salaries and wages. I get to that point, but this is the situation in Antigua and Barbuda, and that's sad.
Yes, Patches, and that's I think people have to recognize the cushion we have in the surpluses. And Patches, you could imagine if this virus had hit us when our debt to GDP was almost 180% of GDP. You could imagine what the fallout would have been. The government over the last 5 years, the Team Unity government led by Dr. Timothy Harris, he made it clear of his stance in terms of what his fiscal movements would have been. And he balanced his budget, he had surpluses, and other countries that you would recognize were in a problem that they were already tight in meeting their salary payments, right? So it means that when this impact of the COVID, started to infiltrate the economy, they're basically up in arms in how to pay civil servants. Gaston Brown is struggling to pay his civil servants. His revenue has not met the threshold, in fact, to pay salaries comfortably. So he's looking to seek financing elsewhere to get it done. In St. Lucia, you would recognize they have also deferred payment from the 23rd until the 30th. They would make a decision what's supposed to happen. They are offering a part cash payment and a bond payment to their employees, to the government employees. So they are struggling. And in direct contrast to what they're doing, we have been, in fact, being paid early as civil servants. You would recognize pay date came early this month. And that was also to other payments made in the various programs that government have. The payments were made early. So that is a strength, and that is due to strong fiscal leadership by the Honorable Prime Minister in terms of ensuring that monies are not even paid, but these were paid early than expected. So that shows the strength of where we are. And I want to go back, Patches, because it's very important that we had these surpluses, because there was a day in St. Kitts, there were days in St. Kitts when monies were being borrowed to pay civil servants and also to finance capital expenditures. And these monies were borrowed on highly inflated rates, and it led to a expansion of the debt year after year. So not only did Team Unity come at the right time in terms of getting the economy under their control, but it's almost divine that we find the right leadership at this time. I mean, I can't fathom not having Dr. Harris at the helm at this moment, because the other options that we had in terms of leadership, they would have been left in a situation where they were already borrowing huge sums of money to finance their deficits year on year. And imagine they were in a situation like this where they had to find the money and the money wasn't there. All of us would be crying right now, Patches.
You said others, right? And I want to be specific here, Howie, because we are not unfamiliar with economic shocks in St. Kitts and Nevis. You agree?
Yes.
Albeit, such experiences would span over different periods in our history and development as a country, and would have had to be managed by different leaders in government.
Yes.
I think that's where we're going.
Yes.
So let's take, for example, the 1980s.
Yes.
The then Simmons government had to manage the economic crisis during the middle part of that decade.
Yes.
I think that was the oil crisis. Was it?
Yeah, the debt crisis.
Debt crisis,
Debt
okay.
crisis, yes.
Okay, upon reflection though, how would you assess the economic performance and leadership of then Prime Minister Kennedy Simmons? Of course, he's now the Right Excellency Dr. Sir Kennedy Simmons, our only living national hero. So how did Sir Kennedy back then captain the ship of state during that crisis?
Okay, Patches, they have there's a striking similarity between the leadership of Dr. Harris and the leadership of Dr. Kennedy Simmons. In the period 1990, in the period of the Palm administration led by Dr. Simmons, a cautious fiscal policy was pursued. So they were balancing the books, and they were very cautious in their expenditures, which led them to navigate around the debt crisis in a way that although the records would show that the debt crisis had the most severe contraction in the St. Kitts economy, the then administration was able to turn around the situation in about 3 years, and in the end of 3 years, they went from a negative growth to about 3.6% in about 3 years. And that was a remarkable feat, because that was done in an environment where the debt did not increase. The debt stayed at the end of 1994, the debt to GDP was around 51%. So even under those trying times, the then government of Dr. Simmons was able to contain the debt below 60%, which was been the fiscal rule for a good managed economy. So they experienced on record the most devastating contraction in the economy. But due to astute leadership at that time and very conservative management of the economy, they were able to get around that contraction and in fact come out with a good surplus after about 3 years in 1989. Sorry, 86, sorry, in what 86, 83 to 86. So the corollary here is Dr. Harris would have done the same sort of approach. Cautious management of the economy, getting your surpluses there, so that when these hard times hit you, you have something to negate the impact of, in our circumstance now, the coronavirus.
Before we get to that point, though, I want to take it in stages, right? I'll deal with the empirical data as it relates to how we dealt with economic shocks.
Yes.
Because we're not unfamiliar in St. Kitts with having to face such shocks.
Yes.
So I will move to the other stage. You dealt with the 80s and the early 90s, 1994.
Yes.
Right? But St. Kitts Nevis had to deal with another economic shock,
yes,
resulting from the world recession,
yes,
in 2007.
Yes.
And yes, as fate would have it, a different period in our history, a different government in office, a different leader at the helm, to it, Dr. Douglas.
Yes.
How would you rate the performance and leadership of Dr. Douglas during that crisis?
Okay. As I said before, Patches, right? You have to put the backdrop of where you were pre-crisis. By 2002, the government had lost control of the finances, right? So, for example, as I told you, in 1994, the debt to GDP ratio of central government was 51%. In 2002, it more than doubled to 104% of GDP. That's the debt, right? So in a short space of 5 years or a little bit over that, the doubling of the central government debt to GDP. In those times, Patches, the civil service increased about 38%, from 1995 to 2002, and there was a 124% increase in the number of non-established workers. So you had a very high wage bill, an unsustainable wage bill, and the capital expenditures from 1995 to 2002 increased almost fourfold what was spent between 90 and 94. So you have a rapid increase, significant increase in personal emoluments and wages, coupled with very high capital expenditure, and all of that had to be financed by debt. So we move forward now to the period 2002-2007. When that crisis hit, we were in a state where things had to be put on hold. And one of the big things that you would have recognized, Patches, is that, for example, the second cruise ship pier, that was, as you would recognize, that was being planned since way back in the early 2000s, like 2003, and therefore, around that time. So all of the capital expenditures, which would have grown the economy around that time, had to be put on hold. And what we experienced after that was a level of taxation increases that were never seen before. And that was their attempt to stabilize the economy out of what happened in terms of the fallout from the global economy. So instead of trying to support like what we're seeing now, there was a withdrawn approach in terms of cutting, like freezing civil servant salaries, cutting down on capital expenditures, and basically not dealing with the infrastructure in a way that was fostering growth. So there you would have found, for example, in 2002, that the economy contracted for the first time in 20 years. And you cannot blame the crisis that was taking place. That was just a part of it. The biggest part of it was that the economy was out of control. And it was out of control because of deliberate, unsustainable fiscal policies. So they were not in a position to handle these crises. So in some patches, that period under that administration, that Labour, then the Douglas administration, performed the worst out of all the other leaders that we had, including the present and the past in Dr. Simmons. I hope I answered the question.
Well, yes and no. For the average man listening, though, what are you saying? Was it poor fiscal leadership at the time?
It was poor fiscal leadership because, Patches, when you cannot pay your civil servants through the regular movement of revenues, and you cannot finance the payments of your civil servants, that is the golden rule of economics. The golden rule states that you must be able to finance your current expenditures with your current revenues, right? So if you can't do that, and you have, that is where all this borrowing started. All this borrowing started because of the inability to control the recurrent side. And even though you had projects that were designed to grow, they could not grow the economy enough to meet that revenue target. So a good leader would have made sure that at the end of the day, your revenues match your expenditures. And so that to me is poor fiscal leadership.
Was it that poor fiscal leadership that led us to the IMF?
And that's it, because an attempt was done to stabilize the economy in 2002, 2003. And it failed because there was not enough strong leadership to bring the economy back under control. And it led to increasing debt year after year to year after year. That what happened at the end of the day is that we had to go to the IMF. And that was a sign of basically losing the control of the economy. Once you go to the IMF, you have basically throw up your hands in the air. And so, to me, the debt is a characteristic of a country that is not being managed properly, because you are supposed to keep those debt levels down, still growing, and that was done way back by Dr. Simmons and Richard Keynes. I was fortunate to have a couple of years with Mr. Keynes, and I could tell you, Patches, Mr. Keynes was the man who made sure that things were in balance, and to the extent that people called him extreme. And so I have to give kudos to him, and he put me in a frame of mind that was saying all this time that this is what a government has to do. A government must ensure that it balances its budget so that at the end of the day, we can mitigate against these crises. So Dr. Simmons, Mr. Keynes, kudos to them. They performed very well during their time in terms of the fiscal management. The period after that, I can say from my perspective, and the figures would show that the economy's fiscal position was not good.
So why, Howie? I mean, why would the former Prime Minister, Dr. Douglas, still continue to mislead the country about the fiscal disposition of the country during his tenure? tenureship as leader, and making utterances like this up to just Sunday gone. He was on radio and had this to say.
When we left office back in February of 2015, $900 million as a result of most admirably managing the financial affairs of the people and the government of St. Kitts and Nevis. $900 million. Whether that has all been used up over the last 5 years in squandermania, I don't know. But we left enough money there for people to be treated.
Imagine that. I mean, we went to the IMF, as you just intimated, cap in hand begging for a $250 million bailout. The Douglas administration never paid the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela for the fuel, oil, or the diesel it needed to run the power plant that generates electricity for the entire country. It was in 2016 when we as a team unity government entered into an agreement with Petrocarib St. Kitts Nevis Limited to settle over $123 million owed by the Douglas administration. But he speaks to squandermania over the last 5 years. I mean, how would you react to that as someone inside there knows and what's happened as an economist?
Okay, Patches, I like to put things simple for the ordinary man on the street, right? Patches, all of us, who are working, I want to be a simple analogy, right? All of us who are working, we have a salary that we get a month time, right? That's called the gross salary, right? So once you have your gross salary, you cannot say that is what you have available to you, because I have a mortgage, right? So that money is spoken for, right? I have a car loan, that money is spoken for. I have a credit card, that money is spoken for. So just calling a gross figure, it masks what the monies were committed to, right? So there's a difference between gross and net. You have monies, right, in place at the end of the month, right? But how much of that money is really available to you to make your expenditures? Because some of it are committed, right? And including in that money, Patches, was the $177 million owed to the IMF. So you can't speak of an amount like that without giving an indication what was there to pay the money. And a lot of the expenditures that the Team Unity government have been doing is trying to get that debt ceiling out of the way. I think the first 3 years or so or more of the Team Unity government, these expenditures had to be made to put the economy, the fiscal position of the economy, back into a control manner. And you said some of the expenditures, Patches, right? So you cannot say on one thing that millions of dollars were left without saying what you left in terms of what to be paid. You cannot take one side of the story and not give the other side of the story.
Critical. Now, I had a professor in university who used to always say, let's get up to date. The economic fallout from COVID has really started to negatively impact companies, countries, and people all over the world. And here in St. Kitts is no different. St. Kitts and Nevis has also been impacted, like I said. So Kennedy has moved on. Dr. Douglas is still lingering around somewhere. And we now have, I should say, new leadership in PM Harris. And he was interviewed by the BBC just yesterday. And this is part of what he had to say.
What is the economic knock-on impacts of this? And are you going to get any bailouts?
Well, the economic impact in St. Kitts and Nevis has been as severe as it is for the rest of the world. Tourism is a large but not the only segment of the economy, and in that regard we have had significant loss of jobs. However, because we had been managing the country well, we developed a significant financial surplus, and we were able, therefore, to do a stimulus in the region of $120 million, targeting at the victims of COVID-19 and setting a framework to get the country back to work soonest.
And when do you think that might be?
Well, of course, we are doing all within our power to get St. Kitts ready for when the world is ready for engagement. You are aware that some of our principal countries with which we engage for tourists, for goods, United States of America and Europe, they are basically now in a crisis situation.
No bailout needed.
No, and we have seen it. I've yet to see any talk about any debt, and that is the critical thing that I am from my vantage point I'm looking for. I've seen some posts on Facebook where people trying to create some kind of confusion, Patches, that where they're going to get the money from. The money is there. And the extent, and if people observe what is going on, Patches, all the programs, all the safety net programs that are there to take care of the persons in need have been vamped up, for want of a better word. Everything has increased. Now, if you did not have enough money, Patches, you think you could increase anything? Those figures would have gone down, not gone up. So every safety net in place, the assistant, the $500 a month program, that has increased. Money is being made available to farmers. There's more money in terms of the persons who are unemployed, who have lost their jobs in the tourism industry, and other self-employed persons, and monies have increased, and is in direct contrast to what you're seeing in the other Caribbean countries. All other countries are struggling to put a stimulus package together, and even when they have done that, they cannot beat our package. Our package stands above the rest in terms of all of the in terms of direct expenditures and even indirect. For example, you would see that the corporation tax has decreased from 33% to 25% for persons who are keeping 75% of their staff. The unemployed, the unincorporated businesses have seen a 50% reduction in their taxes from 4% to 2%. And you've seen all kind of deferrals. The government, as part of the Monetary Council, negotiated with the banks to defer loan payments. And these have to be added up in the stimulus, so it's not a direct cash handout. These are things which are indirect, but they have the same effect of lowering your commitments so that you can live and see yourself through these hard times. So this and Patches, I would want to say that this pandemic is the worst in terms of the impact on the economy that we have ever seen. I mean, I want to reiterate that point. All the crises that we have before experienced as a nation, this is our most trying time, Patches. And I am very happy that we have the leadership in place to manage this, and manage it not in a way that is constrained to a sort of measly sort of approach to it. Is a substantive package, and we can boast as an economy that as a country that our package is better than anybody else's own. That is a fact. That is not fiction. So we are in good hands, Patches, and I pray for the leadership that they will continue to make the very good decisions that have been done before. You cannot fault them for closing down the economy in a time like this, but at the same time, we have to protect our health because you have to be alive to work. And so the package that is being given, the stimulus, is being given in a way that every person gets a touch or a part of it, and we can boast that we are on top of things, locally, regionally, internationally.
No need to panic. It's there's no straight talk unless we include our callers, our emails. As I said, it's a participative program, so I'm going to open the lines anytime now, my Straight Talk family, and include your calls. The numbers are 4652555. If you just joined me, I have in studio two with me, Howie Richardson. Is no stranger to Straight Talk, special advisor to the government, the team of the government in the Ministry of Finance. And I just want to implore you, as per usual, that when I open the lines, which I'll do in a few seconds, that you ought to respect others, and of course, to achieve that, you must first respect yourselves. Let us try to be fair to all concerned. Let us try to build goodwill and better friendships. Let us ensure that the things we say and or do will be beneficial to all concerned. And of course, in all we say and do, I implore you, let us all strive to build a kinder, gentler St. Kitts and Nevis. With that said, I go to the lines, my Straight Dog family, at 11 before 9 o'clock. Caller, you live.
Good evening, Patrick. How are you this evening, sir?
I am peaceful, sir. Yourself?
Oh, great. Doing good. This guy, he's tough, man. Huey?
Howie.
Yeah, good. That COVID-19 is going to be around through the year, into next year. So I just want to let you guys know that there's no way you guys could have election. I mean, they did the same thing in Missouri, and people they got COVID-19. They picked up COVID-19. So you guys going to have to get to it right away. Like people know there can't be no election this year. There is no way you guys could have election this year. This thing going to go right into next year, this COVID-19. So you guys need to get moving. Now, you see the scientists also said that smoking marijuana is one of the, the underlying sickness that will really cause COVID-19 to really take you down. So maybe we could tell that to our buddy or their eye. Smart guy, but he's going to blow his brains out with this marijuana stuff. He and some of these other fellas. Just let them know. Smoking marijuana is a thing. Now, with the economy, like I said, there's no way you guys could compare Denzel with Dr. Harris. There's no way. There's no comparison. If you pay Douglas, Denzel, he couldn't run a lemonade stand. This man Harris knows his stuff. But at some point, because, stimulus is not new money, but at some point, you guys going to have to think because the tourist season is not... Remember there is no Caribbean economy without the United States. There is no St. Kitts economy without it's a fact. So, they're doing good now, but we're going to have to start get the boats moving, getting things running. And government have to start moving. Some places open up, some not open up. The post office open today, not open tomorrow. The people are doing what we need to get the government running, because people have to go to those places and do things. But the guy you got here, and we have to get our people stop depending on the government for everything. Yeah, in this case, yeah. But everything, come on. You have Mr. Wayne, not politics, the other one. Everything. We need better call out everything now to clean the house. Form cooperatives. We are disabling our people by giving them everything. But we in good hands with Harris. But, if you all could get any good loan, you want to take them, man, because this is destroying the whole world. This is not just thinking. How you guys do it, I don't know, but the man is good. Anyhow, have a good evening, Patrick.
Have a Good evening as well, my Straight Talk family. They go straight back to the lines. Caller, you're live. Hello, caller.
A very pleasant evening to you, Mr. Liebert, as well as my good
to
friend.
I want to guide you by the rules of brevity. I know sometimes you're very extended, but no disrespect. But
That's fine, my brother. I can work with that.
Thank you.
I can work with that. And you may be very well pleasantly
surprised.
You may very well be pleasantly surprised at how much I can exercise brevity this evening. I want to direct two questions to my good friend, the economist Howard Richardson. The two questions are, with respect to some of the commercial banks charging accounts holders to have accounts at the banks. We saw what happened when the Royal Bank imposed a charge on accounts holders to keep accounts at the Royal Bank of Canada. We saw what happened. Lots of people immediately withdrew their finances from that commercial bank. So the question is, how about commercial banks that are charging account holders to keep accounts at their banks, removing those charges in a time such as this? And the other issue is the significant reduction of the interest rates charged on loans to borrowers by the commercial banks throughout the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis. So those are my two questions. You have a very blessed and rather safe evening, my dear brother.
Thank you very much for your understanding and your questions. Caller, you're live. Hello, caller.
Good night, the Honorable Ian Patches Labor. Good night.
Good night, my brother.
And good night to my good friend here, Howie Richardson.
Hey, good night, Mr. Politics.
Yeah, man. Thank God for people. Thank God for people like you around still, eh? As a stalwart economist in different governments, and to tell the people the truth, because it got some people out there. They're saying all kind of things just to get this country down. I wouldn't say the government down, because the government is trying their endeavor best to do what they can do, especially in the crisis of this coronavirus. Look how the Prime Minister come with that package. In a quick time, the Prime Minister gets something together that the citizens of this country, the ordinary man and woman in this country, to get something to feed the children. You understand? And now these so-called opposition going on social media, going on different radio talk shows, and saying all kind of negative things about what this government is doing is not right. And people out there hungry, people want the money. Now, if you put a package in place, look how the Prime Minister put the social security with a package that the people could get $1,000 a month, right? You ain't supposed to put everything in place that the people could document and know that whosoever entitled to get that money. You're going to just take up money and give up money just like that? And this is the problem. They didn't have no idea. They didn't have no idea when he was in there for 20 years. He didn't have the idea all those things. And grudge Dr. Harris. You see Dr. Harris performing that well in this unity government. And they're trying all kind of things. They're going off on Facebook with a program now, trying to bring down the government. Where the government going to get this money from? Where they going this? Where they going that? Well, I got good news to them, because the country is going to open back up soon. And the economy going to start to rise again. Because St. Kitts is a God-blessed country, and everybody in this country is negative towards what's going on, what about the government. And a lot of people out there praying for this government, and praying for the Prime Minister, and praying for his cabinet to continue to lead this country when a next election call. Okay. So all the necessary them out there, let us stop, look and listen, and just take a back off of this government. We are going good.
Thank you.
You all have a wonderful night. God bless.
God bless you as well. We go straight back to the lines at 4 before 9 o'clock. Call you live.
Good night, my dear beloved one.
How are you, my sister?
I'm good. And good night, Mr. Richardson.
Good night.
I feel so good when I hear Mr. Richardson talking tonight. Because when the Prime Minister went and pay off the IMF debt, I felt like I lose weight, I feel light, I feel I could have just lift up the Prime Minister, put him on the head and spin round and around and around. And the same kind of feeling came back yesterday when he went on the BBC News with the Englishman. When the Englishman asked him how he can get bailout, and he expect a bailout, and the Prime Minister tell him he don't need a bailout. He got $120 million set aside for the coronavirus. He didn't even bother to mention the $16.9 million. God bless Timothy Harris. Father Jesus, bless him. We have a government that we are proud of. I thank him for coming on board with us and bail Sankit out of this crisis. Sankit was going down to dark sheer. People was just backing and forth and being a deep, dark dungeon with the fifth of the IMF. And the iron fifth of the IMF. And Dr. Honorable Timothy Harris joined with Pam and CCM and bail us out of this deep, dark dungeon. We could now shout hooray. Shout hooray. He just paid $1,000. At whole fat whopping $1,000 to people who lost their job because of the coronavirus. The coronavirus. The other countries tried. They get 600. They get 650. But he come with a whopping 1,000 to his people who would be suffering and can't buy bread. You think, and every time I see him, he look younger. Because he got the blessing of Almighty God on him. You shower him with his blessing. And he will continue to prosper. Because he not tell us, national debt. Dashing and Tanya. Dashing and Tanya. National debt, me dashing and Tanya. When people talk about the national debt.
Okay.
Douglas tell them all kind of foolishness. All kind of foolishness. People was just going back and forth, didn't know what to do. When Dr. Timothy Harris decided to come with Pam and join with CCM, everybody was happy.
Okay.
Everybody was glad. I cannot forget that man. I will never forget him. Sometime I just wonder. When I look at him, I say, what a God.
Okay.
He not just put there now.
Okay, my dear.
He was put there by the hands of the Almighty God to save this country. I am so happy. I'm so happy. Anyway, I feel like the talk.
Thank you.
Now,
Yes, my dear. Thanks a lot.
my brother,
Yes, sister.
I wish you a safe journey home. And Mr. Richardson, thanks for the information you feed us with tonight. The information fat and new. It feels good.
Okay, my dear. Got you loud and clear.
And are you safe journey home? Take care of yourself.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Have a good night.
Have a good night as well. I'll take one more call and then have you respond. How we call you live?
Hello. Good evening, Dr. Ian Patches Leibert, and good evening, Mr. Hobby.
Good evening.
Yeah, good program as usual. Now, Patches, Mr. Hobby, I would like to ask you a question. I know when people broke, they sell a lot of things that they would not sell when they have money. Well, as an economist, I would like you to please explain to us these questions that I'm going to ask you. Why they had to happen. Not had to, but why did it happen? Number one, why is it Dr. Douglas who just tell a lie, which Patrick playback earlier tonight? Why he sold all the sugar factory assets? That's one. And why he come down in town and sell the Simaco building, and then went in town further to sell the depot building, and then sell out a load of land. Poof! Why he had to do that after he was chastised many years ago? Be careful how you're spending the national money. Be careful. And instead of he take advice, we know all know what he say. Public get me ass. That mean not tell me nothing. I could do what I doing. I don't want to hear nothing from none of you. And then see where he put the country $3 billion debt. So my question is that, do you think it was because the debt of $3 billion where he sell all those assets and then turn around and ask even the churches where people sacrifice their salary and take out something and give it to the church? He asked the very church to take a haircut after he refused to take instruction. I listen to the rest of the year. I got a lot of things to say, Patrick, but that's for another program.
Thank you very much. Howie, I'm going to have you dispense with some of those questions. In the event you have not noted them, perhaps one of the last caller first?
Yes. And Patches, that when you, I mean, all of us individuals, I think my good friend said it in a way that the average man looking on and seeing what's happening in terms of government has an idea of why these things are being done. So he answered his own question. When you are in a financial bind, what you try to do, Patches, you try to offload some assets, and hopefully those assets can be converted into cash. So the sale of government assets was an attempt as part of a restructuring to put some more money in the coffers to sort of close a gap. So Mr. I forgot his name, he's my good friend. Culture. Mr. Culture, it's there. I mean, you don't have enough money to meet your commitments, especially your recurrent commitments, which the electorate has entrusted you to do. You can't meet them, so at the end of the day, you have to find a way of getting monies into the kitty. You defer some payments, like giving people, write off payments, giving people haircuts, selling off assets, freezing government salaries for workers, and the whole bunch of things are in an effort to try to allow you to close the gap. And that is a sign that you have lost control. Because under no other circumstances a government would take up assets which are for the people's consumption and sell them. It has to be here in a very dire situation and in a crisis that you have to do all these things. So I hope I've answered that, Patches.
Yes, there's the question about commercial banks charging account holders. I don't know if anything can be done about that. But more importantly, though, is the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank reduces its discount rate, the rate as which unlends to commercial banks. How would that benefit us this time? Will it?
Yeah, well, what happened is that the central bank has limited monetary policy tools in which they could stimulate economic activity. One of them is if you lower the interest rates, what the banks receive, right? Then you could at the other end lower interest rates to consumers and persons who are seeking loans. But we in our economy and in the Eastern Caribbean, we don't really react to interest rate movements. In the United States is a big issue. You hear in the United States that they lower the interest rate by 0.5%, and then the lending rate in Colorado should decrease. and that would allow people to borrow at a lower rate. But the interest rate has not proven to be a very robust tool in terms of spurring economic activity. So it is designed for you to have a financing at a more reasonable financing rate. But I'm afraid that is not gonna
in our parts.
No, not in our part of the world.
A caller made a proposition. It sort of baffled me a bit. I don't know if you picked it up. Right? It says stimulus money is not new money. How do you interpret that? First caller.
Who
the first caller made that comment.
Stimulus money is not new.
It's not new money. I was a bit taken aback by that comment.
No, stimulus.
Stimulus money is help to drive the economy.
The stimulus patches, as I said in my earlier discourse, there are some of the stimulus which are direct transfer of resources, and you could see the monies being spent. There is the $1,000, right? And that is a tangible financial stimulus. The others, in terms of deferment and others, postponement of payment and stuff, those are indirect. But these sums of money that we have been seeing in the stimulus package are as a direct transfer to the populace. So these are real. This is real money. This is not a joking money.
Right now, before we go back to the lines as well, I want there's a question, a comment raised by politics that, and I hear quite a lot. Where is government getting all this money from?
Yes, Patches. If we have listened over the years to the Honorable Prime Minister when he makes his budget addresses, and each year he reports how much money he collect, how much money he spent, and how much money left in the kitty, right? So that is the surplus. So you take that surplus, you put that aside. Next year come again, Patches, he goes into the budget address and he outlines all of his various intakes of monies and his expenditures. Surplus again. And you could see by the payment, I mean, one of the very significant parameters, I wouldn't say parameters, but one of the significant outcomes of these surpluses is that civil servants have been given back to back double salaries. And that has all come about by this fiscal stance in which he manages in the Ministry of Finance what he spends and what he keeps aside.
Right.
So it's not something that it just come fall out of the sky. It's careful and astute management.
Let's go back to the lines. Caller, you're live.
Hi, Patrice. Good night.
Good night, sir.
And Howie, good night.
Good night.
Yeah. I've been hearing the figure that Dr. Douglas left been bantered about. Sometime I hear 600, another time I hear 700, and now I hear 900. What is the real thing?
Okay.
That's your only question?
Hello?
Yeah, that's it.
Okay, thanks a lot. Sorry?
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, okay, well, I'll have Howie respond. Howie?
Yeah, Patches. Now, this is where I have to get technical, Patches, because the fact that the government accounts are different from other government accounts, right? When you look at the 900 million, somebody has to tell me where that money is in terms of a deposit. Meaning, Patches, the Treasury reports, the government reports its surplus year after year. If a figure is being banded in terms of an amount, somebody would have to tell me, right, where that breakdown of that money in terms of what is the quantum being reported, being talked about. Somebody would have to say, Patches, for example, I am as an individual, I would say on my bank account in Scotia, I have $10. On my bank account in National Bank, I have $10. And then you put them together and you say that this is what I have. I can't fathom this $900 million unless the details are given in terms of the breakdown. That's all I have to say about that.
Nobody can. Let's go back to the lines at 12 past 9. Caller, you live.
Good evening, Mr. Liebert, and good evening, Mr. Richardson.
Yes, good evening.
You guys have been doing very well. I've been learning a lot, man. By the time I'm through tonight, I'll be an economist. Anyhow.
Better one.
Yes. Back in the 1994, 95 elections, the opposition then was saying that there was a massive debt in place put there by the Simmons administration, a debt of some $215 million. And as you quite rightly said, 6 or 7 years later, the debt had doubled. In the meantime, there's a leader of the country who had a little old house in St. Paul's with a little green Honda, and you found after that same period of time that his assets increased dramatically while the country debt started to mount. His assets started to mount as well. By the end of his term in office, 2015, we know what state he was in. He even spoke about having something like 17 properties. But what I would like to know, though, is if the Team Unity government did not have to face the IMF, pay off the IMF debt of $117 million, plus a whole heap of payments to Venezuela for supplies of oil and that sort of thing, over 100 million, I think it was, where would we be today as regards to our, shall I say, financial assets and our ability to pay a better stimulus, even an improved stimulus for a longer period of time? Not only that, where do you guys anticipate we'll be this time next year? In other words, I'm trying to find out from you guys what you think about what the upcoming tourist season would be like, because we rely very heavily on tourism for our revenues, along with the cities by investment. I don't know how that is doing these days, but I assume that we're making some money from that as well. But I'm interested to know what your feelings are about the upcoming tourist season. Thank you.
Thank you very much, caller. You want to dispense of that quickly, Howie?
Yes, Patches, I'm trying to remember the first part. Let me start with the bottom part. In the tourism sector. Patches, the tourism, the Minister Grant and his technocrats, they are placing themselves as we speak to ensure that at the end of this, wherever it ends, Patches, they are in a position to move quickly in terms of trying to get back what was lost. I had a discussion with Raquel Brown from the Tourism Authority. And, even under this COVID-19 lockdown and no flights coming in, they are already working to see if they can put some marketing out there, keep the relationships that they have with all their flight network, keep busy, because everybody is going to start to jump into the market aggressively because they're thirsty. So everybody now is trying to position themselves that when things start to get back to normal, they're in a position. In fact, the authority with their limited budget is trying to see where they can push some sort of information and sort of feel out their partners so that they can feel comfortable that when things are ready, Senkis will be accommodative. Now, the big question, and that's the $1 million question, Patches, is that we, as one caller spoke about, what happens in the United States is very critical to what we are facing. The majority of our tourists come from the United States. So we have to keep a keen eye on the happenings in the United States. And as soon as we can get a good understanding of what the flight network, the airlines, to some extent the cruise ships later on down the line, when we get an idea of that, I am sure that the ministry and the tourism authority would jump at it very quickly to ensure that we can get something in terms of business in the upcoming season. But I said it all depends on the United States and other major tourist hubs.
Okay, let's go back to the lines. It's 18 past 9 o'clock. In the event you've just joined me, I have in studio tonight economist Howie Richardson, special advisor in the government, and we're looking at the economy post-COVID. Call you live.
Greetings, Mr. Ian Patches Libert. How are you?
I am peaceful, my brother. Yourself?
Very good. Mr. Howard, greetings.
Greetings.
Mr. Patches, you continue bringing education to the public, and that's the only how black people, that's the only how the population can get liberated. Mr. Howard, from the platform that you put to the public this evening, the economic platform, I asked of you two questions. The sugar industry was a very important industry to the economy of the country. At the time of the closure of the industry, and sometimes the complaints that you may hear arising throughout the society now, would you say the closure of the sugar industry was visionary for the diversification for the country? That's one. And two, you talk much concerning the IMF this evening. If from this administration that's in office now had continued the same process, not paying the debt to the IMF, but still under the IMF program, what would have been the ramifications with our programs within this crisis? Thank you, and you continue to be good. Patrick, just stay strong.
Thank you very much for your input. Very good questions. I will have them responded to momentarily. Caller, you're live at 20 past 9.
Yeah, good evening, gentlemen.
Good evening,
yes, Mr. Richardson?
Yes.
Yes, you will hear the government before, the opposition now, which was the government before, downplaying the surpluses that the government would have said they would have made, right? And they're saying that they're not surpluses, they're monies that they leave there, right? So I want you to tell me, is it possible for a government or party that just take over government to get surpluses, especially when you had a government there who's saying that they leave a lot of money, and what they themselves wasn't getting any surpluses or balance in the books. So tell me, is it possible for a government could just take over and just start getting surpluses after, like I said, after a government was there and wasn't doing it themselves? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Caller, you're live. Okay, caller, you are live. Hello, caller. Howie, perhaps we can dispense of those three questions there. The last one, you've got it?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. The surplus, as I said, Patches, is reported each time Parliament meets. The financial year stems from January to December. And let me just, I have a table in front of me, Patches. Now, in 2000 and in the year 2019, right? Let me go back. 2019, the government achieved a current balance of $402 million. And that current balance was the highest current account balance ever achieved in the St. Kitts and Nevis economy. 2018, 306.27. 2017, 88.21 million. 2016, 121 million. And if you look at the situation as it attended to in 2000, when the government was, the previous government in their first term, they had a deficit of 46.7 million in 2000. In 99, a deficit of 21.23 million on their current account. So what I'm saying here, Patches, is that these are deliberate reining in of expenditures and enhancing revenue. So you had a previous government who were not capable of achieving surpluses. So that is maybe why they are so befuddled with surpluses, because they never really got much of them. So this government now has been getting surpluses. So it's an alien sort of terminology for them, because it was more like deficit after deficit. So people have to understand that the management of the economy is a serious thing. And these surpluses are not being bandied about to appease anybody. These are facts. These are facts that you have a balanced budget and you could move to get things done when you're in balance. When you're out of balance, which was what we had in the previous administration, in a deficit position, all you can do is finance your deficit by debt. And that is why I have to come back to it and say that the proof of the pudding is the debt to GDP ratio. Your debt to GDP ratio, you can't hide from it. You're either balancing your books through the hard way of managing your economy and keeping your expenditure down and spending prudently in those areas. For example, as you would know, Patches, a number of projects are being done. And I must add, Patches, is that even though we are in a particular light where we have the COVID-19, the government is moving, the team unity government is moving to get things incrementally back on track. That is why the road resurfacing project, as you can see, you're the Minister of Infrastructure, the road improvement projects, monies are being spent. And the road improvement project is in train. You have also the project with the old road bay. You can see work now recommencing. So the government is not looking to have this lockdown forever. And these are steps that are being taken by a careful government to ensure that the economy starts to get back on track. So, and these surpluses is where the money is coming from to fund those projects. Imagine if we were in a place like Antigua or St. Lucia or the rest of the Caribbean that they cannot even pay their civil servants. There will be nothing like this in terms of these projects. So it's a kudos to government that they've been able to deal with the initial fallout in terms of the persons having a difficult time finding their feet again in terms of employment, and then keeping them healthy, and at the same time getting the economy back on track. And we are seeing signs of this. And while governments, other governments, for example, Antigua, is waiting for some IMF monies to be put in a CARICOM regional sort of, in a Caribbean regional block, and then on on-lend to the CDB, and then the CDB would then on-lend to member governments. We don't have to wait for that, Patches. We have the money right here, and the money comes from these surpluses. So when people are looking at economic activity, especially in this COVID thing, we don't have to wait on nobody to help us. The government has made very good in terms of their fiscal position, and that is what we are capitalizing on as we speak.
Is for a COVID day.
Okay.
The other questions in relation to the closure of the sugar industry, was it visionary for diversification of the country, and the team unity government, imagine under IMF, had they continued?
Yeah, Patches, I was around in the Ministry of Finance when that sugar industry was being closed. The situation at that time was that the finances were fairly tight with the industry, but post sugar industry, there should have been some sort of long-term planning in terms of getting some sort of other sectors to fill into the gap, right? And what I would say, Patches, right, is that you had an SIDF fund that at one point had about $2 billion. I might be corrected in terms of the exact figure. And that money, to me, represents what the economists term opportunity costs of not doing anything with that money. So we could have been in a better position where our sectors would have been brought up to a higher level. It's like an equalizer. See, you have a mixer there, Patches? Think of those as economic sectors. You could put up that mixer in agriculture, put up that mixer in tourism, put up that mixer in hotel and restaurant sector, and you could move the economy. Now, when you did not use that $2 or $3 billion to do that, it set the economy back in terms of where it should have reached at this time. So I'm saying, to go back to the sugar industry, the financials of the sugar industry did not allow it, and the economic environment in which sugar was being produced was not conducive to keep the industry open. But at the same time, if you were in a position where sums were coming in to look at what you could do using some of the assets that the sugar industry had, you could have basically brought the agricultural sector to a higher plane, but that was not done. I think there was too much reliance on the citizenship by investment funds and not being expensed in the productive sectors to get the economy more diversified.
In terms of the team unity continued under the IMF program?
The team unity would have aced all of the benchmarks, meaning that if they continued, they would. To me, this is my take, Patches. It was no sense continuing with the IMF program when you had the money there. You would save some interest payments. When you have the money in your pocket now, what do you do, Patches? You could pay out those debts and put yourself in a easier situation. So, to me, if the decision to pay it off was a very good decision, because it allowed you to save some interest that could have gone into your pocket, right, for expenditures other investments. If they were under the IMF program, all the benchmarks, like for example the debt benchmark, the current account balance, current account balance benchmark, the team unity government would have aced those. The IMF would say, well, we're not coming back here because you guys are all right. I mean, so all of those benchmarks which were being put in, for example, at the previous administration, they had sometimes struggled to meet these guidelines, especially the structural benchmarks like civil service reform and other structural benchmarks that they had. They had a hard time meeting them because the civil service was brought up into significant numbers. They had to freeze wages for public servants. And people have to remember that. When you had all these double salaries, you have to remember the time when your wage, you couldn't get your increments. And that was a benchmark in terms of keeping salaries down. So the unity government would not have to live under those benchmarks. They would have aced them.
Okay. Let's go back to the lines. Caller, you're live. Hello, caller.
Hi, yes. Good morning, good day.
Yes,
I have a question.
Yeah, could you turn your equipment off or move away from it, please?
Yes, I have a question.
Yeah, go right ahead, please.
I have a small business, and it's been taking a very long time to get import duty concession. What is the Ministry of Finance doing currently for small businesses? Because I know that Mr. Richardson works at Finance, and Finance takes forever to approve import duty concession. What is Finance doing for small businesses?
We respond to the question. That's all? Any other questions?
Yes, that's all.
Thank you. We'll respond to the question momentarily. Caller, you're live. Hello, caller.
Yes, good night again, Mr. Richardson. You mentioned right a while ago that the SIDF at one time could have had about $2 billion or so dollars, right? So the SIDF and tourism was two of the sectors that the government used to kind of grow the economy and keep it going. So tell me then, with $2 billion in a fund, SIDF fund, how is it then the government could not have had a balanced budget and get a surplus? I don't know much like you or anything like you. So I would want to know from you, how is it they could have got that kind of money and still don't have a surplus? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let's go back to the lines. Caller, you're live. Hello, caller.
Good evening, Patrice. How are you?
I am peaceful, sir. Yourself?
Wonderful. I'm giving thanks. How are you? Woodley.
Okay, I'm great.
Patrice, I listened to you all tonight. Okay, and I understand what you are saying. We are now speaking about the tourism sector and speaking about next season. But I think it's something that we have to be very, very careful about, because up to now, no one knows how next season is going to turn out. Let me say something to you, and I would say this. I'm a cab driver. The real beginning of the season was when it closed. I mean, the season opened in October, but we had ships, yes, we had small ships, we had big ships, but most of the work actually goes to the agent who the ship came to. Because they sell their tour, the agent would pick a certain cab driver who they want to drive the cab, and yes, they may get a lower fare than what you would get from the dispatcher at tourism. And I'm saying that we had 1 million cruise passengers 2 years in a straight, and the CEO and the minister, all them get up on the bank with chest. Yes, we have 1 million cruise passengers. But they did not, they went out and they introduced the destination to the tourists, to the ship. But the people who really sell the destination were the cab driver, the dispatchers, even the people at Timothy Hill, or the people at... Okay, and very little regard have been given to them. I think it's time enough now for this season that we look into overstaying passengers, because a lot of people are going to be concerned about traveling a cruise ship, and they're going to go on aircraft. So we need to go into overnight passengers and take that seriously. Have a nice evening.
Thank you very much. Have a nice evening as well. Let's go back to the lines. Caller, you're live. Hello, caller.
Very pleasant evening to you again, Mr. Liebert and Mr. Richardson. I wanted to touch a little bit on the
Could you
investment.
just move away from your
Yes,
equipment?
I have turned it off.
Thank you.
I want to touch a little bit on the investment in agriculture. That is the local Ministry of Agriculture, along with the administration, the government, investing more in agriculture. We are looking at the closure of the sugar industry since 2005. So you do the maths, we're talking here about 15 years ago. And when we look at the abundance of arable lands that are available for agriculture, the very same lands that were used to cultivate and produce the sugar cane, I am here thinking and considering why can't the government invest more in agricultural cooperatives. In Grenada, for instance, there are quite a number of local agricultural cooperatives. So if more agricultural cooperatives can be set up, what you are doing in effect actually is you are creating employment for lots of folks who are unemployed and searching for employment. That is utilizing the lands that are available and getting more into agriculture, growing more food, so that in cases like what we are experiencing now, COVID-19, where we have a problem with food coming into the Caribbean, with all these
but I'll have you
problems.
I'll have you respond, Colin. Do you have another question? You talk about cooperatives. Is there another question?
Not really. Essentially, the formation of cooperatives and investing more in agriculture, that is essentially what I'm talking about. So I can leave it here, no problem.
Fine. I'll have him respond to
no problem.
things about investment more in agriculture. No. Yes, thanks a lot. Caller, you're live. Hello, caller?
Yeah, me again. Just a matter of interest. There was a previous question somebody asked about how could the government just pay off the previous debt by the previous administration? But it doesn't seem so much to be the administration that is in government that determines the surpluses or the deficits. It seems to be the individual, because there were a number of deficits running in the previous administration. And when they changed the Minister of Finance in 2009 and 2010 to Dr. Timothy Harris, we suddenly had surpluses. And after that, the former Minister of Finance took back the job in 2011. And we know what happened after that. We went back downhill again till we ended up in the hands of the IMF. And when Timothy Harris took over the Ministry of Finance again in 2015, we started having surpluses again. So it does seem to be one of an individual managing the finance as against a government per se. What do you think about that?
Okay, thank you. Let's go back to the lines. Caller, you live at 20 to 10.
Hi, good evening, my parliamentary representative.
Good evening, my fellow constituent.
And also to my good friend, Howard Howie Richardson. How are you doing tonight?
I'm good.
Okay, Mr. Liebert, I would like to thank you for inviting Howie to sit in with you and by educating us and letting us know what is going on with the listening audience. As Mr. Richardson previously mentioned about the SIDF, I know under the former administration, monies were borrowed from the SIDF by some big labor stalwarts, and some of them was even going around boasting and saying, oh, I'm not paying that now. So I would like to ask the question, is there anything in place for that?
Ask the question. I'll have you respond after. That's the only question?
Okay, one more thing before I go. Also, now that Mr. Harris gone into government, and putting a grip on things, a lot of them labor people going around saying, oh, things tight or things hard. It ain't a matter of that. It's just that he put a grip on things so they ain't getting the money as freely as they used to. Money was given left, right, and center under the former administration. So now that he gone in and put a grip on things, they're saying how things hard and things tight. But it ain't a matter of that. It's good financing. And Team Unity, continue doing a good job. Have a good night, gentlemen.
Have a good night as well. Howie, the SIDF borrowings, the import duty on small businesses, the SIDF having $2 billion, but yet you're running deficits. Stay-over rivals, a focus on that, as well as the investment in agriculture through cooperatives, and the other comment or question as to rather whether it's the individual head in the Ministry of Finance or that gets the surpluses and not the government. How do you respond?
Okay, Patches. I had a feeling that question was going to be asked in terms of the person in the government managing the finances, and it's interesting. It's interesting, Patches, when I look at the figures. Dr. Harris was the Minister of Finance from 2008 to 2010, right? And it's interesting that in 2008, there was a primary balance. That is a balance after taking out interest payments, right? There was a primary balance in 2008 of 51 million. In 2009, there was a primary balance of 66.9 million. And as soon as he left, a deficit of 15 million happened in 2010. So in the 2 years, 2008 and 2009, he broke the stem of deficits, primary deficits. And as soon as he left, the caller is right. As soon as he left, that thing ballooned up. And I think, I don't want to speculate, Patches, but you have to think, why, if somebody is doing a good job, you have to take that person out of it. So it's a question I can't answer because I didn't make that decision to put him in or put him out. So, but the figures are there to see in plain view that when Dr. Harris was in the Ministry of Finance for those 2 years, 2008 and 9, he achieved a primary balance on the fiscal accounts.
Dr. Harris don't consume alcohol, right? So perhaps it's a good thing he don't drink. He had a drunken sailor on the other hand. That's a nice moment. The question of say over arrivals in terms of a focus for tourism.
Yeah, and I think that call is very intuitive. And I, from my interaction with the tourism authority, they are thinking of the same thing. That is why I said before, they are trying to see how best they can capitalize in terms of the stayovers, because with the cruise sector, I believe, would take a little bit longer to recover because the social distancing protocols are not really easy to manage in a cruise ship environment. But the stayovers and the impact of stayovers, we know, Patches, is much greater than cruise ship passengers. And to me, what I've been hearing from the hotels is that they are in a position that they can get fairly moving quickly in terms of getting back their plants in operation. So once the flights start to come in, and I think that focus should be considered in terms of where you're going to go first, because the stayover is going to give you the greater impact. So the caller is right. The stayover should be given some serious consideration in terms of movements out of this COVID situation in the short to medium term.
Under Team Unity, there are incentives for small businesses.
Yes.
In relation to concession and duties and other concessions. Do you want to address that lady's call?
Yes. I think I know who's the caller, Patches. Now, what I would say to this, right, Patches, is that concessions are a foregoing of government revenue. So the Ministry of Finance, I'm not involved in concessions. I want to state that clearly, Patches. Where I stand, I have a different portfolio of duties that I manage. So although I'm in the Ministry of Finance, I don't see the day-to-day concessions in terms of what comes through the Ministry of Finance. I want to make that clear. Now, on occasion, I have been given some, persons would come to me and, ask me to look into a particular matter. And I've done my best in terms of getting these matters to the persons who deal with these concessions, because most of them, in terms of small business, as you would recognize, they originate from the Ministry of Trade. The Ministry of Trade, to their small enterprise area, their small enterprise unit, gets these applications, they process them and send them to the Ministry of Finance. Now, once these concessions get to the Ministry of Finance, there's also a process to ensure that, for example, Patches, you have a restaurant. I'm just being hypothetical. You have a restaurant, but you want to order a 6-wheeler truck. I'm just trying to bring it straight to you. So it's not a walkthrough. I mean, government is giving up their revenue for these concessions, so there is a process. If the process sometimes takes too long, I cannot speak to that. But there's a policy in place, and the government is keen on assisting small businesses. And I'm sure the caller would understand that the support being given to small businesses now under this community government, I don't think there's a comparison in terms of what pertained in previous administrations. So the government is on top of assistance in terms of small businesses. And even the package that is being given, as you mentioned, Patches, there's something for small businesses. Their tax rate has been reduced by 50%. So it's to be seen. The person might have some instances where she feels that one or two businesses that ask for concessions may have not been processed or still outstanding. But she can call me, and I will do my best to follow up on any issues that she has in terms of assistance to small business in terms of concessions.
Before we go back to the lines, there are two questions. We addressed the billions but still have deficits. Did we address that? $2 billion, but there were still deficits.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. No, we don't. No, we didn't do that, Patches. Okay. No, Patches. I have sat back and I have looked at how that fund was set up, and I think throughout Team Unity's gestation, that was always a problem in terms of the Team Unity administration looking at how that fund was operated. And you would recognize that it seemed to be a parallel economy. And what pertained in that parallel economy was that persons were being given loans, individual loans, and they were not being paid back. And so it was a very, very upsetting situation for the Team Unity when they were in opposition. And that is why there was a call to put the funds in the consolidated fund. Because when you put them into the consolidated fund, you can direct your expenditures to where they're more efficient and more productive. Now, that person who indicated that they were personal loans, I mean, I didn't look at I have not been privy to, there was an audit done of it, but I understand, from my best understanding, that loans were given out to people and there were expenditures made not in the most efficient manner, because you would recognize, Patches, that once the consolidated fund has money and is being expended, you better have a good justification for the money. You in the Ministry of Public Infrastructure, when something goes to the Ministry of Finance, they go through it with a fine tooth, with a microscope before you get any money to spend on your projects. But best of my understanding, that sort of checks and balances was not being done in the SIDF. So anything that person says, whether she can, I don't think she can substantiate it, but we all heard the stories, Patches.
Now, before I go back to the lines and take a final set of calls, the question or suggestion about the investment in agriculture and the establishment of cooperatives. And cooperatives are established through amongst the farmers themselves and just a facilitation through the ministry? How's it done?
Yes. I think there have been efforts at these cooperatives, but I'm not a what should I say, Patches? I'm not an expert on models in terms of agriculture. I leave that to the technicians. But if the idea can be brought out in reality, where farmers come together and they sort of, pool their resources and buy things, for example, procurement, and sort of ensure that each of them gets a fair piece of the action, I think that's all good and well. But I cannot comment further on that, not being in the agriculture area and having that kind of expertise to go into the nuts and bolts of cooperatives.
Mr. Leibel, please stop talking about the economy with this email and its several surpluses, because you and Howie will send Dwyer and the Labour barbecue woman crazy. The madwoman said yesterday on radio when all of the surpluses finish, and she is praying for it to run out, and let she see what they are going to do. Poor old Dwyer and Miss Barbecue just grudge how pathetic reads this email. This other message reads, Mr. Minister, what people do not realize is that Inland Revenue's line every day is very long, and that is money coming in. These are calls coming in. I go back to the lines. That caller, you are live, and Mr. Caller as well. Caller, you are live. Hello, caller.
Hello, Patches.
My dear brother.
Yes, Yuri, I want to ask you two questions. What do you think about the three prime ministers you have seen so far in terms of managing finance? That's one. Because to me, the last one, he didn't understand money. He don't understand money, and he don't understand children and young people in this country. You say thing there, it's all right, In fact, you should have come out plainer that the common man on the road could understand what you're trying to get across. Because once you don't know nothing about managing money, you're supposed to be the prime minister of this country and hold the finance in this country. The next one I want to ask you is what you think about the SIDF fund money, putting it back in the consolidated fund? Because it's a very good thing, and the lady asked a very good question. Because that boy abused this money, He abused this money big time. When you look at the way how this guy was giving money just to certain people and the next set can't get. Like, this money will belong to he. Talk about special fund, private fund, and he party hackers them, getting big loan. But what I believe in the caller, some of these people should pay back these money,
What's the third
because
question?
there's a lot of money,
What's the third
Good
question?
night, Patches, yeah.
I thought I had the three questions you said.
Huh?
I thought you had three questions, just those two. Okay.
Well, no. I did trying to run short that somebody could come in. But let me ask you the last one. Yuri, I heard you say that it's very important for the tourism to check for stay over. That's very good. But I would like to see Down and Port Zante keeping in order. So when we get a declaring call, we in good nick, that we could accommodate business, because man who said that university done up and down this country, I talk about down there's white elephant, and I know down there can't be no white elephant once spot is around here. And I'm warning these new tongue people, don't play mumu, Because you're going to drop hard on IO. When Dan Newton man leave, you're going to drop hard on IO. So think wise. Have a good night.
Good night, my dear brother. Go back to the lines and take a few more calls. Call you live.
Good night, gentlemen.
Good night, sir.
I do not know if this can fit into what the discussion is all about. But there's a practice in town there by some banks, except National Bank and I guess the credit unions, that if someone works for John Doe and John Doe has a checking account with a particular bank and pays the person in a check, goes to the same bank with that check where John Doe has his account. But you, the receiver of the check, do not have any account with that bank. And they're telling you that you have to pay $10 or $12 because you do not have an account there. Now, under the banks fall under the Ministry of Finance. I am now asking if that could be correct, if that is right for the banks to compel somebody to compel someone to have an account with them when they don't want to do so. And if they don't do that, they have to take out the $10 or whatever. I would like Mr. Gentleman to explain that, if possible.
Okay, thanks you. Well, good question. Caller, you're live.
Good evening. Good evening. Sorry about that. Howie and Mr. Labor, dear, thank you for getting in. But, Howie, I want to ask you a simple question. Now, they had the electric light company running through some problems, and they could not meet the standard of current, right? And they had a big generator down La Valley, or what they call it. And when the electric light people went to get the generator to hook up to it, they were stunned down. But at the same time, they went to the hotel over Frigate Bay here, Marriott, and buying current from Marriott to assist the people in the different areas and so on. But at the same time, they raised the current, the bills, and the people. And then here's come the Prime Minister who do all of that, come and say, what are you doing? And he asking us to go and demonstrate because the electric bill them was too high. And he's the one who set it up there. You understand me? Because he'd have no knowledge of what they call it, you know, like what you is there, economists or something, know thing about running these kinds of funds and different things. Because to me that don't make no sense as you got a big generator and now you have to end up now trying with the generator, you know. So thank you for coming here tonight and educating the people. Thank you, Mr. Labor, for bringing him here. And God bless you all. God bless the country. And stay safe. Don't forget to wash all your hands.
Thank you, my dear brother. Sanitation. Yes, I'll take two more calls and we wrap tonight. Caller, your Mike.
Yes, hello. Good evening, Patrick. A long time I try to get it. The people at West Street, they want to know when you're going to give up the house them, and they want them at a low price. And look at Mark Bradley. He gave his whole month's pay to Nevis people. What are you doing? Are you putting a 10% incentive to some of the poor people who ain't got no money? And the housing project, what we have, NEOC, we not got no money to pay them enough because you see what the Corby do with us. So we still back behind with money. We ain't got no job. And we want as quick as possible that the Corby can set up to go, that we can get reward, because we got the bills then to pay and the bank and everything to pay with the bills. So do something. See, Mr. Mark Bradley is pulling Nevis out. So you are supposed to pull us out. What about the $1,000 some people say they get? I ain't get any yet. I hope I will get. And Simako
you applied for it?
was sold by a PAM man. So when you are talking about Simako, it's sold by a PAM man, and the other depot sold by a labor man. So I don't see what the difference. Love so ain't have so. And the man on the radio talking about the surplus. Timothy was there when Douglas were in there too. So all of them waste up the money. So don't think about one somebody. A shilling have to side. So take your mouth off Honorable my husband Douglas, please. And good program, but you are just too long when people call in. See you. Have a good night. Safe journey.
Have a good night as well, dear. My dear lady. I'll take a few more calls. Caller, you're live.
Yeah, man. How are you, man? Good evening.
I'm peaceful, so yourself?
Pretty good, man. Yeah, I was just trying to find out from your guest there. The stimulus package that the government put out, do you think that it was too aggressive in the first instance? Because, I believe that the citizens themselves should be making a sacrifice as well, because if everything falls on the government, and this COVID virus sticks around for a while, would that create like any type of added strain and put the government back into debt?
I'll have you answer your question, Carl. That's the only question?
Yes.
It's a very good one. I'll have you respond after a few more calls, okay?
Okay, all right.
Thanks for your input. Caller, you're live?
Rachel.
Yes, sir.
Good evening. How are you?
I am peaceful.
Tell us Rock, right? It's my good friend Hilly. That generator down at La Valley did not belong to the government. It belongs to Howard Engineering. Because up to today, the government still owes Howard Engineering for the work that was done at the golf course at La Valley. If you need any information from that, check with Mr. Eddie, the lawyer. He have all the information. That generator at La Valley was owned by the developer who was Howard Engineering. Up to today, the government think it's still owe Howard Engineering money on that golf course. Have a nice day.
Thank you very much. We'll be a little at variance with that, but we'll discuss that at some other time. Caller, you live. Hello, caller.
Oh, hey, sorry, Patches. Sorry, good night, Patches. Good night, Howie.
Good night, my friend.
Good night.
I have a question to ask you, which keep cropping up all the while. Is that when you all went into government, and I will call the person because Mr. McMahon, he keeps saying about it all the time. You give me the impression that you all went in there and met money. Did you all meet? First of all, he said you met $1 billion, and then he came back and said, but I read where he said that you met close to $1 billion. And the next thing I need to know is that just about me there and doors, I went up there one day for exercise and I see all the roads up there paved. But I'm living in a small area and I need to know when you are going to start doing something because it's a small area. It's not a big area like doors. I mean, all the roads up there, I was shocked when I went up there and see they were paved. So I'm wondering what you are going to be doing in this area here to get some roads in. But I need to know about the $1 billion because I keep talking about it. Did this government unity met $1 billion or close to $1 billion? And I want to know if you, Mr. Howard, you can answer that question.
Okay, he will. Thanks a lot for your input. I'll make this my final call for tonight. Caller, you're live.
Hello, good evening.
Good evening, my dear.
Mr. Patches, a pleasant good evening to you.
Could you turn the equipment or your radio down or off or move away from it, please?
It's off.
Thank you.
Okay, good evening, Mr. Patches Liebert, and a pleasant good evening also to Mr. Richardson.
Good evening. Good evening.
Okay. My contribution tonight, Mr. Richardson, I want to applaud you for all the facts that you're stating tonight on the radio station. Yeah, and also want to applaud my Prime Minister, Dr. Timothy Harris, for putting a smile on St. Kitts and Nevis, the citizens of St. Kitts and Nevis' face yesterday and today with $1,000. Right? Mr. Patches, I watching you all the time. And I'm here lying down in my bed and listening all night. And I was saying that you, Mr. Patches Libert, is the hardest working minister. You come nightly on the radio and you still have your work to do. I want to commend you highly for the job, for the work that you are doing. Mr. Richardson, keep on doing what you're doing for the Federation. You is talking facts, you're not mumbling, and you're laying the card on the table. I want to applaud both of you tonight, and thank you all, and long live Team Unity Government. Long live Prime Minister Dr. Timothy Harris. Good night. Get home safe, Mr. Patches. Mr. Richardson, you get home safe, and God bless you both.
God bless you.
Have a blessed good evening.
Thanks for your input. I said I'll make that my last call, but I'll make this one if you can
You
use 30 seconds. Hello, caller? Are you there, caller?
Hello?
Yeah, I'm going to give you 30
Yes,
seconds.
I had a quick follow-up question. I'm wondering if you guys are kind of like looking ahead because, say for instance, the COVID virus goes away. What type of strategy are you guys going to be using to wind people off of this stimulus? Like, because, once you start giving people money, they're accustomed to this money, and they're going to have those persons who are going to probably want to stay on the stimulus package for some type of extended period. So what type of strategy you guys are going to use to wind the people off of it once the economy bounces back?
Thank you, caller. I'll have Howie respond. Thanks a lot for your input, and I'll take that. I'll make that my final call for the night. Howie, we have a few callers here. I eventually have not noted them. I can jog your memory, but you want to start with that last one? How you wind people off stimulus? Well,
Yeah.
It's only a 3-month stimulus, though, isn't it?
Yes, in the first instance. Patches, there's a process in terms of getting that package, right? You have to meet certain requirements, right? What has to be done, similar to the under $3,000 program, when households make under $3,000 a month, there are checks and balances in place to ensure that these persons meet the requirements. And to me, it's a same situation has to be done in terms of those persons who are getting the $1,000. They have to meet the ongoing checks and balances in terms of where they are at any particular point. Whether 3 months from now, if that program is extended 6 months, to ensure that their situation is being monitored. So to me, the persons who are involved in sort of looking at who is in the program and what is their circumstance going forward would have to make sure that they're dedicated to see what changes are taking place in the employment status of these people. So it's not an easy task because, as you would recognize, in every sort of policy you have, the implementation gets a little bit tricky. And so over time, you sort of fine-tune yourself to deal with certain eventualities. So I'm confident, Patches, that this is not going to happen in this case because we have done a similar program like this before, a number of programs like this, and the people who are out there, they eventually, there's some friction in the beginning, but who deserves it is going to get it, and who deserves to come off of it would come off of it. What's the next one?
In relation to the caller who raised the question of cashing his check in a bank in which he has no account, then he has to pay a charge. Can anything be done about that?
Well, to me, Patches, the Ministry of Finance has an oversight in terms of what happens in the local banking sector, but the real supervision of banks takes place at the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank in their bank supervision department, and they monitor whether the banks are meeting their conditions as prescribed on the Banking Act. Now, what I would have done if I was the caller, the institution is not too rigorous, and the Ministry of Finance, they work very close, the central bank and the Ministry of Finance. So I am positive if that person wants to, you know, be a little proactive and approach the ministry, I'm sure they would consider what as being his observation. But I would go further than that, Patches. I am not, as I said, involved in that particular part of the ministry. It's a very big ministry. It might sound like a little space in terms of what officers do what. The responsibilities differ. But what I could do when I leave this program, and maybe tomorrow, I could approach the technicians in the Ministry of Finance and see if they've heard similar concerns. So I wanna say to that caller, I would take a look at it and see whether or not something can be done, because the caller seemed a little bit upset in terms of this money's being deducted and things like that. But we have to understand that there's a legal framework to deal with this, and it might be that in a competitive environment, you don't know if one bank charges something, you are free to move to another one. But in terms of contravention of any banking regulations, I could do some inquiries into that, Patches.
Now, the questions from Jamdown. Assess your assessment of the performance of the three prime ministers. What do you think about the SIDF being put into the consolidated fund? And he mentioned as well about the tourism and the approach in terms of stayovers versus cruise ship arrivals.
Yes, Patches, the data and in the way that the various leaders manage the economy is plain to see. Dr. Simmons and Dr. Harris, they are of the same dispensation in terms of their approach to managing the economy. And two of them can rest assured that under their leadership, the current leader, Dr. Timothy Harris, he stated from the beginning in all of his pronouncements that he is going to ensure that the economy never reaches to a point like the former administration in which they mismanaged the economy. And he's basically doing what he's saying. Now, Dr. Simmons, by his actions, with the support of a very strong Minister of Finance, carried the same sort of approach, that they were able to have a cautious stance, and that bode well for the citizens of St. Kitts and the growth in the economy. And they were able to withstand a number of shocks in a fledgling, newly independent economy. And facing these shocks it's a remarkable story that they can tell in terms of their fiscal and management of the economy. Now, where I have a problem, Patches, is that middle leadership. And I was a part of it, and I could have seen when things were deteriorating. And you need to get your house in order fairly quickly when you have these shocks, because you don't want to reach the stage where it balloons on you and you basically have to give up the reins of the fiscal accounts to somebody else. And that is what happened. So I would say, Patches, in terms of the figures, you cannot discount the stewardship of the Honorable Dr. Timothy Harris, because, as I said before, his surpluses and his expenditures in terms of infrastructure, there's no no one can have that accolade as him. He's on the top. So I would put Dr. Harris on top, and I would put Dr. Simmons and Mr. Keynes close by, because they use the same sort of approach, but just that the magnitude of the figures have changed in terms of the surpluses. So as an economist, I cannot disregard the figures. So Dr. Harris to me is on top. The Dr. Simmons and / Mr. Keynes, who was the Minister of Finance, second, and Dr. Douglas is at the bottom of the pile.
Stimulus package too aggressive, according to that caller?
The stimulus package to me, what the caller has to respond is that this package the package is just a stopgap measure. It does not equate to what these people were earning before, right? So the closer you can get to meeting what they were having before, you cannot put a package in saying it's too much when at the end of the day they're still in a deficit. So to me the question is, the best package would be a package that puts them closer to what they're making before. So it's not a question of too much in terms of the stimulus, is that hopefully that amount of money would put them closer to the deficit so that they could pay some of their bills.
The issues raised about La Valley, the La Valley project is on the books as a debt to the government. Isn't that correct? Some $200-something million?
Yes. I think that would have been a debt. But in terms of the dynamics patches, I'm not familiar with I can't say the intricacies involved in the generator and who own it and who have it there. I can't answer that question.
Okay,
so.
let's dispense. You mentioned, I think you made more than one mention of the $900 million that the caller raised too. Just for information, the Duas project there, the roads were done by the government, but that was a condition, a precedent to the development of that project by TDC, that housing project there in Duas. The government did build those roads. I don't think we've had missed any other question. But just as we wrap, I want you to consider this comment and make this part of your wrap, Howie. If you can just consider this.
The Ministry of Health continues to carefully find the balance between maintaining a sustainable suppression of transmission of the virus whilst ensuring resumption of some parts of economic and social life.
Yes, as the CMO just intimated earlier, that the Ministry of Health is trying to find a balance between maintaining a sustainable suppression of the transmission of the COVID-19 virus whilst ensuring resumption of some parts of economic and social life. Which parts of economic life should be resumed as soon as possible? You can respond and in the process give your wrap.
Okay, Patches, my situation is this, in terms of my thinking, Patches. The economic drivers, right? You have to put those economic drivers back to work, because, for example, Patches, at the end of the day, in the construction, for example, the construction industry employs a great amount of the labor force, along with the tourism sector. Certain parts of the tourism sector is going to be a bit difficult with the flights not being coming in and the cruise ships. But there may be some allied ancillary services, for example, restaurants and those services that cater for that sort of value added in terms of the tourism plant, right? we need to get those persons incrementally back at work, because this is where the amount of persons will be greatest to get back to work. And when they get back to work, the expenditures from their family, when they're dealing with their family members, that money would filter down into the economy. So you have to get the big cheese. The big cheese would then feed the smaller ones, and then the smaller ones would then spend that, and it all goes well for the economy. So it's going to be a very hard decision, Patches, and it's one that I know that the cabinet is going to carefully consider, because when you get the bigger slices back at work, the smaller ones going to get taken care of. And at the same time, Patches, I would like to add that the predicament that we are facing now is not something that is we are facing alone. If you listen to the airwaves, Patches, all other countries face a similar predicament. How much to free up, for want of a better word, and how much to hold back in terms of the health matter. And that is a balance that everybody is trying to find. And I'm sure that the leadership, cabinet, with the advice of the health experts, are going to at some point come with that balance. It might have to be fine-tuned further, but things have to start moving forward. And I think that as on a sectorial basis where the employment takes up the most numbers, that is where you need to start to get the people back into economic activity.
Thank you, Howard Richardson. If you joined me late, beg your pardon. I had with me for the entire program Howie Richardson, Special Advisor and Economist Special Advisor to the Ministry of Finance and Economist by training. And we are certainly, surely out of time, long out of time, and I understand, I'm happy, sorry for your indulgence. I know the lines were still going, but we just out of time. My time is done, John, and I got to run. I want to, in the process, thank Almighty God for guiding our conversation tonight. And as always, I want to thank the many callers, even those who didn't get in. We do apologize. I want to thank those who sent emails. I want to thank my Facebook Massive and whatever social media you're on. I want to thank you, the listeners. Remember, you are the ones who make Straight Talk, and for that reason, I say a big, big thank you. My name is Ian Patches Libert, and God's Spear. We will connect on Monday for another edition of Straight Talk. Until we do, have the best of what's left of tonight and enjoy your weekend. Enjoy your weekend. Remember...
We're different. We're 98.9. 98.9. Win FM.
Protect yourself from the novel coronavirus. Wash your hands thoroughly and frequently for at least 20 seconds each time. Avoid shaking hands and touching your face with unclean hands. If you have to cough or sneeze, do so into your flexed elbow or a paper towel and then dispose of it. Keep a distance of 3 feet away from anyone with the cold or flu-like symptoms. Boost your immune system with vitamins, drink plenty of water, and get adequate rest. Visit your doctor, the nearest hospital, or health center if you or a family member becomes ill. A message from the Ministry of Health and the National Emergency Management Agency, NEMA.
First time ever I saw your face, I thought the sun rose in your eyes. that was there. At my command, my love. And first time ever let you felt your heart so close to first time ever I saw.
Quintessential rumblings through the universe.